Chapter 2648. Just as Yin Yanxia was feeling puzzled, Yi Qing Luo's clear voice interrupted his thoughts. Young sect master Yin. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled slightly towards him. The profound energy fluctuations which you sensed should be released by me. Yin Yanxia was startled. You? But didn't you just arrive? Hearing these conversations, those who wanted to flee the scene also stopped in their tracks. They sensed the fluctuation of dark force. Was it Miss Yi who released it? Could it be? What conflict did Miss Yi have with young Miss Miao just now? Everyone's gossipy hearts were stirred. Early this morning, second young Master Miao came to our courtyard to cause trouble, begging me to save their young Miss Miao. Xian and I came here, but we fell into Chief Miao's trap. He tried to use Gu on me and Xian. In order to avoid Chief Miao's trap, I had no choice but to use my profound strength and leave with Xian. Just now I saw a group of you rushing over here. I was worried that Chief Miao would place Gu worms on you, so I came over to take a look, but to think. As Yi Qing Luo said that, she took a glance inside the bedroom. The intense sounds were still going on. Miao Zhengwei had knelt in her courtyard this morning. Butler Yin was also present, as well as other onlookers. If she brought DMO Shan along and pretended that she had just appeared, it would be too fake. When they opened the door and saw Miao Rongrong and Miao Yixiong, he would only think that she was the one who had done it. Half-truths and half-lies came out of Yi Qing Luo's mouth again, especially when the Overlord was by the side. Everyone decisively chose to believe him. I was wondering why second young Master Miao was so sure that the person who was having sex with Miss Miao was the Overlord. You are trying to set the Overlord up. No wonder he's been luring us. The Miao tribe leader wants to poison the Overlord. Trying to use Gu on us? They want to turn us into their Miao tribe's puppets. Miao Zhengwei found it hard to breathe under the pressure of countless comments. In the face of the crowd's accusations and hateful gazes, none of them could hold back. Some kind of yellow liquid spilled out from where he was sitting. The fishy smell made people feel disgusted. This is a trap set by the Miao tribe. Let's go. Let's barge in now and see what else they want to say. With that, a large group of people rushed into Miao Rongrong's bedroom. Among them, there were those who wanted to curry favor with the Dizun and distance themselves from the Miao tribe. He was also angry because he was used by the Miao tribe and almost offended the Dizun. Seeing that the crowd was getting out of control, Yin Yanxia immediately stepped forward to stop them. Everyone, let's wait for young Mistress Miao to come and ask her questions when it's convenient. If we barge in now, it would be our fault. However, just as he reached the bedroom door, Yin Yanxia's expression changed. That's not right, the smell of blood. There is a very strong smell of blood inside. The expressions of the indignant crowd froze. Yes, there was a strong smell of blood coming from the closed bedroom. However, Miao Rongrong and the man's voices continued. Under such a heavy stench of blood, he could still continue. Wait, don't you feel that something is wrong? The more they thought about it, the stranger they felt. We're outside and we're making so much noise. No matter how good the soundproofing is, they must have heard our voices. How could they continue? Could something have happened to him? Everyone looked at each other. Chapter 2649. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she pondered for a moment. Something is indeed not right, but it's not convenient for us to go in, so it's better to let second young Master Miao go in first to take a look. Miao Zhengwei, who was called out, suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Qing Luo in shock. What are you looking at? Didn't you hear what Miss Yi said? Why don't you go in and take a look? A man kicked Miao Zhengwei, lifted his collar, and pushed him to the door of the bedroom. Under the pressure, Miao Zhengwei could only brace himself and push the door open. The strong smell of blood assailed their nostrils. Miao Rongrong's cries which sounded like she was going to die in the next moment, became clearer and clearer. Miao Jingwei's hands trembled. Pushed by the people behind him, he walked in with trembling legs. The door was pushed open. The messy and bloody scene in the house was reflected in everyone's eyes. Not a single part of the bedroom was intact. It was as if they had just gone through an extremely intense battle. This house had not collapsed yet. It was really sturdy. Miao Zhengwei moved closer with the speed of a tortoise. He looked in the direction of the voice, no matter how much mental preparation he had. At this moment, she couldn't help but scream. Almost subconsciously, Miao Zhengwei turned around and was about to run. However, he staggered and tripped on the ground, his body falling heavily on the ground. His face bumped into something. The stench and nauseating stickiness made his face scrunch up. Miao Zhengwei stretched out his hand, trembling as he tried to pry it away. However, what he held in his hand was a severed limb. Blood continued to flow out of the wound. Ah! Miao Zhengwei was so frightened that he screamed and threw away the severed limb in his hand. When everyone saw Miao Jingwei's reaction, they couldn't hold back their curiosity and walked in. When the gaze looked in that direction, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. There were also some people who couldn't take it. They leaned against the wall and vomited. The scene in the room was truly unbearable to look at. Miao Rongrong was pressed to the ground. Her usually extremely beautiful face had long been deformed and was stained with thick blood. Her naked body was covered with scars and blood. One of his arms was severed from the shoulder. One of his arms was severed at the wrist. And the man on top of her was doing the most primitive of actions. His entire body was covered with densely packed bugs. Those bugs were still crawling in and out of their wounds. It was really disgusting. The bedroom was instantly filled with more than 20 people. His surprised voice finally attracted the attention of the two people. The man stopped moving and turned his head bit by bit. Everyone saw the face that was covered by densely packed insects, as well as the faintly visible white bones. Goosebumps broke out all over his body. The people present were all profound practitioners who had seen the world and had experienced slaughter. But this scene really challenged the bottom line of their tolerance. Just when everyone's stomachs were churning and they were trying to stabilize their image, Miao Zhengwei was like a madman, desperately holding his head and screaming, "Impossible! How could the clan leader be devoured by the goo formation? No, this is absolutely impossible." He raised his voice. Yi Qing Luo expressed that she couldn't help but give Miao Zhengwei a thumbs up, as expected of a pig-like teammate. She was still worried about what excuse to use to divert everyone's thoughts to the injuries of the goo worms. Miao Zhengwei had already given her a perfect excuse. This sentence was said by Miao Zhengwei. Chapter 2650. As expected, when Miao Zhengwei's words fell into everyone's ears, everyone immediately turned around and ran for the door. Was that a goo worm? That was the Miao tribe's goo worm? Although they did not know goo. But it was also very clear. Once they were infected by a parasite, they would wish for death. Who would have thought that the Miao tribe's leader would be devoured by the goo worm? So, it's the poison's backlash. Yi Qing Luo took over the conversation and entered the bedroom with DMO Xian. After taking a clear look at the environment in the room, her expression changed slightly. "Miss Yi, no one is controlling this goo insect. You and the Overlord shouldn't get too close to each other. No one knows what will happen if the goo insect gets close to you." Someone saw Yi Qing Luo and DMO Xian walking into the house and immediately opened his mouth to dissuade them. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyes and saw Miao Yixiong grabbing a rag by the side and wrapping it around his waist. He didn't care that Miao Rongrong was also naked. Miao Rongrong woke up, and when she saw what was happening, she hugged herself tightly. Harming others will harm themselves in the end. Never thought that the venomous worms that you used to deal with me and Xian would make you suffer the consequences of your own actions. Yi Qing Luo looked at Miao Yixiong indifferently. The flesh on Miao Yixiong's face rolled, and his voice was extremely hoarse. "Bitch! Miao Yixiong, Xian, and I will remember everything you and Miao Rongrong have done today." Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as her brows revealed a sinister look. "So, as the price, Miao tribe leader and Miao tribe's sacred maiden's position, I'll accept it." The flesh and blood on Miao Yixiong's face rolled even more violently. He clenched his teeth savagely as he pounced towards Yi Qing Luo. "Slut! How dare you! How dare you!" Before Miao Yixiong could pounce forward, a torrential, terrifying, profound energy laid horizontally in front of Yi Qing Luo. Bang! Accompanied by this loud noise, Miao Yixiong was sent flying backward. He slammed into the wall beside him. Rumble! This collision, the bedroom, which was already on the verge of collapse, suddenly collapsed. Countless rocks smashed onto Miao Yixiong. That palm strike almost took half of Miao Yixiong's life. Then, when the house collapsed, he was smashed all over. He immediately vomited blood and fainted. Everyone looked at Yi Qing Luo in shock. Mo Xian's tall figure blocked in front of Yi Qing Luo. His black hair danced in the strong wind. His purple robe fluttered in the wind. Miao Yixiong fainted. Mo Xian then slowly turned around. His long arm once again hugged Yi Qing Luo's slender waist tightly. His peach blossom eyes were filled with concern. "He didn't hurt you, did he?" Yi Qing Luo's arms circled around his waist as she smiled and shook her head. "No, Xian protected me very well." Mo Xian's arms tightened. Soon, Yin Qinghao also hurried over. When he heard everyone's explanations, his face immediately darkened. "Drag him to the Qin Yu sect's dungeon. How dare you act so openly in my Qingyue sect?" Yin Qinghao was infuriated. The people of the Miao tribe are really capable. This sect master is not done with the Miao tribe. Poison Dizun? Trying to push Miao Rongrong to the Overlord? If it wasn't for Yi Luo's quick-wittedness, the Overlord was really poisoned by the worm. The one who had to bear the Overlord's wrath was the Qin Yu sect. How could Yin Qinghao not be angry? How could he not be annoyed? When the guards who followed behind saw Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong covered in worms, they didn't dare to lift them up. Chapter 26:51. The guards were stunned as they turned to look at Yi Qing Luo. Yin Qinghao was also slightly stunned. "Miss Yi has some understanding towards goo worms." "Miao, tribe's future, sacred maiden told me." Yi Qing Luo smiled mysteriously. "Future sacred maiden?" Everyone instinctively looked towards Miao Rongrong. On seeing Miao Rongrong, who was covered in blood, they retracted their gazes. The current Miao Rongrong had lost both her hands, and her reputation was ruined. There was no way she could take part in the sacred maiden selection. Furthermore, Miao Yixiong wanted to use goo worms to control the Overlord. The Miao Gu family was a huge clan which had existed for close to 1,000 years. Shouldn't it be annihilated? Miss Yi is planning to change the dynasty. One of the slightly older men asked carefully. Yi Qing Luo smiled as her eyes squinted. "By then everyone will know." Saying that, she didn't continue to stay as she pulled Mo Xian and left this courtyard. When they left, there were still people rushing towards the courtyard one after another. Probably not too long later, the entire North Continent, or even Nirvana realm, would all know about the Miao father and daughter duo's deeds. After leaving the courtyard, Yi Qing Luo brought Mo Xian and speedily turned to a corner. She turned sideways as she looked at the people who were heading towards the courtyard, as her lips curled into a faint, cold arc. She didn't intend to let the Miao father and daughter duo die, just like that. Not to let them see it with their own eyes. Everything they had spent so much effort for had become the possession of Miao Yi, whom they had always despised and despised. How could they be worthy of their unscrupulous methods? Now, oh, she had more important things to confirm. Earlier, that black thread which was pulled out from Miao Rongrong's eyes. She specially smeared soul-chasing powder on it. With this soul-chasing powder, she could easily follow that black thread and find the person who controlled Miao Rongrong. Perhaps she could also find out who the mysterious person who had been in contact with Miao Rongrong was. But if she really met that mysterious person, could the current Xian resist against him? Lil Luo, seeing Yi Qing Luo looking at him, Dmo Xian's handsome face, which was like a god, revealed a smile. Yi Qing Luo pursed her pink lips as she raised her hands and cupped his face. She gazed deeply into his eyes. Warmth and joy rippled in Dmo Xian's eyes. The only thing that was missing was his devilish charm. Yes, the current Dmo Xian was no longer the Dmo Xian from before. Ever since Dmo Xian had helped her block the love goo and the heart separation goo, when she opened her eyes, she sensed that something was wrong with Dmo Xian. If it was any other time, when Dmo Xian opened his eyes, he saw that she was injured by Miao Yixiong. He would definitely pay attention to her injuries at the first moment, and he was angry because of it. However, Dmo Xian did not even utter a single word. He just looked at her with that kind of gentle and affectionate gaze. Moreover, he had become extremely domineering. He was extremely possessive. He couldn't bear to leave her even for a moment. Dmo Xian was ultimately still affected by the loveworm. The first person he saw was her, so I clung to her. If the first person he saw was Miao Rongrong, would he also look at Miao Rongrong in the same way? This thought flashed past her mind. Yi Qing Luo's mood instantly wasn't beautiful anymore. She should poison Miao Rongrong a few more times. Let Miao Rongrong suffer, and not die, daring to think of her man. Luckily, the first person Dmo Xian saw was her. Chapter 2652. I'm going to a place, and it might be very dangerous. Xian, stay here and wait for me, all right? Yi Qing Luo tried her best to speak in a gentle tone, not knowing if it was her misperception. Somehow she felt. After Dmo Xian was inflicted with the loveworm, not only was his attachment towards her, he had a stubborn persistence. His intellect seemed to have been obstructed. Using old man Tsang's words, that was Dmo Xian didn't know how to think about anything other than her. He also didn't know how to think about anyone or anything other than her. He only knew how to stay by her side, hug her, look at her, not leaving her side for even a moment. Even earlier in Miao Rongrong's courtyard, Dmo Xian said, "This lord is not blind," was muttered softly in front of Dmo Xian before she appeared. Seemingly, except when he was facing her, he could still converse normally, but in front of others, he didn't seem to be able to see anyone else, unless the others were implicated and had something to do with her. Luckily, he had a respectable status, and he was temperamental. Even if he ignored others, they wouldn't think that he was affected by the worm, and would only think that he was in a bad mood and didn't want to bother with others. No, Dmo Xian, who was inflicted with the love worm, still knew how to reject. "I want to be with you." An expected answer. What Dmo Xian was talking about was the love worm. It was the love worm that formed an attachment towards her, which meant to say he wanted to see her at all times. Dmo Xian would not let her leave alone. Yi Qing Luo tiptoed and kissed his lips, smiling. Then, Xian must listen to me and follow me. Dmo Xian nodded without hesitation. All right. In the end, he looked at her tenderly and added a sentence. "When we return, Lil Luo, I will give you a reward." He raised his hand and his slender fingers pointed to the place where Yi Qing Luo had kissed earlier. Yi Qing Luo. This fellow, was he really inflicted with the love worm? What happened to the promise of listening to her? Why did he still know how to negotiate terms with her? Ahem. Old man Tsang coughed awkwardly in his mind. Di Zun is different from ordinary people. His willpower is also different from ordinary people. Naturally, he is different from other people who have been poisoned by the love goo. Yi Qing Luo pinched Di Emotien's handsome face fiercely. All right, reward. Di Emotien immediately revealed a bewitching smile. All right, let's go. Yi Qing Luo pulled Di Emotien's hand and quietly left in the direction of the soul-chasing powder. The moment the two of them left the corner, a tall and slender figure slowly appeared at the place where the two of them had been standing. The man's facial features were gentle and refined, looking towards the direction where Yi Qing Luo and Di Emotien had left. His brows were filled with pain. He raised his hand and pressed it against his chest. He had finally fallen in love with a girl. That woman, she already had a fiancé. He could tell. Yi Luo really loved Dizun. It was obvious how much the Overlord loved Yi Luo, but because they loved each other, that made his heart ache even more. The man closed his eyes slightly. His breathing was painful and weak. Master, tell me, how should I overcome this tribulation? Stay away from her. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind. The man was startled and quickly turned his head around. What entered his eyes was a handsome man dressed in red robes. Although that man was dressed in red, but he emitted a sharp and icy cold aura, as though he had walked out from an ice cellar. His entire body was emitting a keep-away aura. Chapter 2653. That red-clothed man was Zhu Wuxin, young sect Master Gu. She's not a woman you can dream about, Zhu Wuxian warned coldly. Gu Jingyu's body stiffened as he stared blankly at Zhu Wuxian's expressionless face. Death God Castle's castle master, you also, Zhu Wuxin's cold eyes swept over, and Gu Jingyu's words were stuck in his throat. That gaze was as sharp as a blade, as if it wanted to leave countless scars on his body. Gu Jingyu's heart thumped fiercely. This time, Gu Jingyu was completely dealt a heavy blow. He had originally thought that the woman he had taken a fancy to was the only woman in this world that he felt was worthy of him. But unexpectedly, in fact, he was not worthy of her. Her fiancé was Dizun. There was also a Death God Castle Lord who was her admirer. In comparison, he wasn't even worth a fart. Zhu Wuxin did not look at him again. He walked directly towards the direction where Yi Qing Luo had left. Death God Castle's castle master, Gu Jingyu suddenly raised his head and called out to Zhu Wuxin. Zhu Wuxin's footsteps paused slightly, his cold eyes filled with obvious impatience. She loves the Overlord very much. Will you give her up? When Gu Jingyu asked this question, there was a voice in his heart asking him the same question. Zhu Wuxin didn't turn back. He continued to walk forward. The man's cold voice came with the wind. She will only be mine. Following the trail of the soul-chasing powder, Yi Qing Luo and Di Emotien had already left Qingyue City. He had actually arrived mass graves. The mass grave was extremely remote and dark. There was even a faint chilly breeze blowing past. Yi Qing Luo had just neared this place when she acutely sensed that the airflow in the air was faintly mixed with some austere atmosphere. She grabbed Di Emotien's arm tightly and quietly approached the direction of the soul-chasing powder. Did it fail? A cold voice sounded in a low voice. It was illusory and not real. Yi Qing Luo immediately pinpointed the direction where the sound came from. She pulled Di Emotien and leaned against the stone wall. Through the messy surroundings, Yi Qing Luo could faintly see a tall and straight figure standing at the side of the mass grave. Fortunately, although Di Emotien was poisoned by the loveworm, his power was still there. The two of them held their breaths, not letting the person on the other side notice them. The man stood beside the mass grave. The air was filled with the smell of rotting corpses. It smelled awful and disgusting. However, that person didn't seem to be able to smell it. He raised an arm and seemed to be looking at something. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as she clearly saw. That black thread was floating in that person's palm. His gaze swept to that person's face. His pupils constricted slightly. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold arc. As expected, it was him. Following the representative of the East Wave Continent's imperial family, little Princess Lanling Nua, the bodyguard whom Lanling Nua treated as her trump card, serene solitude. Ever since he saw the black lines in Miao Rongrong's eyes, ever since he realized that Miao Yixiong seemed to have lost his mind, she had guessed that it might be related to Yuji, because when they first met Yuji, she was on Yuji's body. She sensed a kind of profound yin qi which was similar to it, but Yi Qing Luo was certain. Yuji wasn't the mysterious man who had been in contact with Miao Rongrong, which meant there were at least two parties who looked for Miao Rongrong. Or perhaps Yuji and the mysterious man were in cahoots. Chapter 2654. The black thread was moving in his palm as though it was arguing about something. A thread like a living thing. It had its own thoughts, and it could talk too. Yuji, Yi Qing Luo expressed that it was really a rare sight. Yuji paused for a moment. Suddenly his fingertips pinched the moving black thread. If it's seen through, the mission will fail. How should I explain to the revered one? That black thread, the entire thread was twisted, as though it was in extreme pain. Yuji seemed as though he couldn't feel the black thread on his fingertips. As he coldly hooked his lips, the mission failed. It's all because of you. Improper control. Apologize to the revered one yourself. That tone was obviously a threat. The black thread seemed to be struggling. No one was willing to bear the wrath of the revered one. But in the end, it still succumbed to Yuji's threat. The entire thread body hung limply on Yuji's fingers. Yuji's lips curled as his eyes flashed coldly. Then go and apologize now. Saying that, he threw that black thread directly into the mass grave. Under the special imprint of the soul-chasing powder, Yi Qing Luo could clearly see that black thread, which was like a strand of hair, was like a snake, speedily swimming in the wreckage of the corpses. In the tranquil mass grave, Yuji's cold and ethereal voice rang. Yu-in, other than apologizing, don't say anything else. The black thread paused slightly. Immediately after, it flashed and completely left the mass grave. Yi Qing Luo didn't immediately chase after it. Only when the aura of the black thread, which was the fellow named Yuin, completely disappeared, Yuji then slowly turned around, blended into the night, and left the mass grave. It was silent for half an incense's time. Yi Qing Luo then pulled Dmo Xian out of their hiding place. In the air, she could still vaguely sense that extremely weak, cold breath. She frowned slightly. A trace of blood-colored light faintly surfaced in her eyes, which disappeared in a flash. Hearing the name, Yu-in, Yi Qing Luo was already certain. The black thread and Yuji were in cahoots. They were both the subordinates of that so-called revered one. That revered one, who exactly was he? What was his motive? Why? She always felt that this revered one was always pestering her. Could it be she had something that the venerable one wanted? Little Luo. Suddenly, she heard the man's displeased voice. The force on his waist suddenly increased. Her face bumped into the man's thick chest. She collected her thoughts and looked up. She met the man's eyes, which were filled with her reflection. A chilly wind blew in the mass grave, fluttering Dmo Xian's black hair. It also blew on his purple robe. On top of that peerless beauty, that tempting face of crime, this level of breathtaking, even Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but be bewitched. Don't think about anyone other than me. The man was very jealous, and his tone was very obvious. I don't like you to look at other people. Yi Qing Luo burst into laughter. Could it be that he was jealous because she had placed all her attention on Yuji just now? He was poisoned by the love goo. He was surprisingly honest. Moreover, his honesty was adorable. Yi Qing Luo's eyes were filled with smiles as she raised her hand and pinched his cheek. Ever since Dmo Xian was poisoned by the love worm, she had not moved at all and had her hands all over his face. If it was usual times, she dared to pinch his face. He dared to eat her up cleanly, not leaving any dregs behind. When they returned to the courtyard, she would look for Miao Yi to discuss about helping Dmo Xian to cure the goo. But there wouldn't be this chance in the future. It was rare that she could pinch him to her heart's content. Chapter 26:55. I'm not going to look anymore, be good. Yi Qing Luo beamed as she said that, as she tiptoed and kissed his thin lips. The current Dmo Xian. He was very easy to coax. As expected, after Yi Qing Luo did this action, the jealous man's face immediately lit up with a smile. He held Yi Qing Luo's petite body tightly as he stared at her seriously, saying word by word, "You have to look at me. Whatever you want to do, I can help you." Following that, he pulled her hand and placed it on his chest. The rhythmic heartbeat was beating against her palm again and again. His taut muscles were hard, yet elastic. This wasn't the first time Yi Qing Luo touched his muscles, but every single time, Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but blush. This is you, this is yours if it's me. The current Dmo Xian's thinking was very simple and extremely stubborn. Yi Qing Luo wasn't displeased by the man's overbearingness. On the contrary, her smile grew wider. Old Man Song had said this before. Dmo Xian, who was poisoned by the love worm, all his actions were the most direct thoughts in his heart. His overbearingness, his possessiveness, he was filled with love for her. Because of the love worm, it was completely magnified. This was also why Old Man Song wanted her to be the first person Dmo Xian saw. Otherwise, based on Dmo Xian's character, if he really had to depend on Miao Rongrong because of the love worm, she was afraid that Dmo Xian would rather die than listen to the erosion of the love worm. Because right now, the person he depended on was Yi Qing Luo. That was why Dmo Xian didn't resist at all, allowing the love worm's corrosion. Yi Qing Luo smiled till her eyes curved as her face blushed, making her elegant face look extremely adorable. Her face was like a peach blossom and her eyes were like silk. No matter which man it was, there was no way to escape. The charm that Yi Qing Luo released. Dmo Xian's eyes locked onto her deeply. That pair of peach blossom eyes were overflowing with colors, resplendent and dazzling, almost based on instinct. Dmo Xian lowered his head and kissed her smiling lips. Both hands tightened the strength he used to hold her. There was an indescribable feeling clamoring from head to toe. With a clamor, he swallowed the person in his embrace. Yi Qing Luo naturally felt the rising temperature from Dmo Xian's body. Her cheeks turned even redder, burning hot. Damn it! As expected of a man, they were all poisoned by love goo. A man's instinct was still there. Ah, Xian, all right, the reward has ended. We need to continue chasing after that black line. Yi Qing Luo held Dmo Xian's hand and raised her head, interrupting his instincts which were being driven. Ah Xian still had love goo in his body. Being too agitated at this moment was not good for one's health. The man who had been interrupted stopped moving, but he was extremely displeased. His almond-shaped eyes didn't hide his emotions at all. His entire person had sunk into a very low-pressure atmosphere. His shoulders slumped and his face was filled with displeasure, as well as the kind of pitiful look that Yi Qing Luo despised. Yi Qing Luo felt the man in front of her now looked like a canine pet. Moreover, it was a very cute dog-type pet. It made Yi Qing Luo's young lady's heart swelled up. She tiptoed and raised her hand as she caressed the man's head. Her voice was gentle as she smiled. "All right, Xian, accompany me to do something first, all right?" Dmo Xian indeed looked like a dog-type pet. The moment Yi Qingluo's hand landed on his head, the low pressure which was lingering around the man instantly dissipated. Chapter 2656. Such a emotion really made one unable to hold it in. Yi Qingluo looped her arm around his neck as she spoke in a low voice. After we return, I'll give you a reward, all right? His obsidian pupils gazed deeply at her for some time. The man then nodded his noble head. His face was filled with displeasure, but his lips were curled into a smile. Yi Qingluo was all smiles as she rubbed his head, just as she was about to lock onto the location of the soul-chasing powder. Yi Qingluo suddenly felt a chill down her spine as she raised her head and looked towards a certain spot in the darkness as she suppressed her voice. Who? Her voice had just landed. The arm around her waist tightened. She raised her eyes again, and the man's tall and broad back view was in front of her. He stood in front of her. His peerless face was filled with seriousness. I'll protect Lil Luo. Yi Qingluo's fingers held his hand tightly as her 10 fingers intertwined with his. Following that, her gaze stared towards that direction. In the darkness, a figure was indistinctly discernible as it neared from afar. Very quickly, she saw the red-robed man's tall figure completely appearing in front of her eyes. Yi Qingluo's little head popped out from Dmo Xian's back, and when she saw the person clearly, her expression congealed. Zhu Wuxian! Why was he here? Had he followed her here? Then, didn't he have seen Dmo Xian's abnormality? Indeed, Zhu Wuxian's icy cold eyes glanced coldly at Dmo Xian before falling onto her face. When he saw that only her little head was exposed, her entire body was completely covered by Dmo Xian. That pair of icy cold black eyes seemed to be even colder. What's the matter with him? Zhu Wuxian's voice was cold and hard. Turn silly. It's none of your business. Hearing Zhu Wuxian's words, Yi Qingluo's heart thumped hard. She instinctively dashed in front of Dmo Xian as she opened her arms wide and looked at Zhu Wuxian vigilantly. Her subconscious action, which made Zhu Wuxian's eyes dimmed. His complexion was slightly pale. The hands under the red robe were clenched tightly, as though he was restraining something. After a long time, he pursed his lips as his cold eyes continued to look at her. Yi Qingluo, you're mine. Your matters naturally concern me. Bam! A burst of dense, profound energy chopped downwards. The man behind Yi Qingluo revealed a sullen expression as he waved his sleeves and struck out a hurricane. Zhu Wuxian's eyes turned cold, his figure moving as fast as lightning. That dark force directly smashed onto the ground. The entire mass burial mound shook violently. It could be seen that Dmo Xian had used at least 50% of his strength. Seeing that Zhu Wuxian had dodged the attack, Dmo Xian's face turned frosty as he waved his sleeves again, about to strike again. Yi Qingluo immediately pounced forward and hugged his arm. She knew why Dmo Xian was angry. At this juncture, she didn't want Dmo Xian and Zhu Wuxian to have conflict. After all, Zhu Wuxian now knew about what had happened to Dmo Xian. If this news were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge storm in the entire Nirvana realm. Those people who were unconvinced with Dmo Xian would definitely swarm over, hoping to take the opportunity to kill Dmo Xian and replace him. She would never allow such a thing to happen. Zhu Wuxian, don't think that just because you've saved me a few times, you can continue to think that you're infallible. I, Yi Qingluo, am not anyone's possession, even if. I also belong to Xian. Her pink lips pursed slightly as she looked at Zhu Wuxian with a resolute gaze. I will repay you for saving me, but please don't use this as a reason to disturb my life. Her words paused for a moment. Chapter 2657. In love, there is no room for even a grain of sand. Your persistence towards me has caused me trouble and will make Xian unhappy. It wasn't that she was heartless, facing this man who had a stubborn persistence towards her. Facing this man who had once shared a beautiful memory with this body. Facing this man who had saved her time and time again. To tell the truth, if they could become friends, she was extremely happy. But Zhu Wuxian's persistence. She really had no way to repay him. Love was a matter between two people. There was no room for a third person. If she didn't love Zhu Wuxian, then why should she give him any hope? This was the attitude towards her and Xian's love. The most correct attitude towards Zhu Wuxian. Yi Qingluo's eyes sparkled with a red glow as she met Zhu Wuxian's eyes tightly as she said, word by word, "Don't in the end, we don't even have a chance to talk face to face peacefully." The last 3 words came out from Yi Qingluo's mouth. Zhu Wuxian's body took a small step backwards. It was a very minute movement and not obvious at all. "Don't." Dmo Xian's expression turned chilly as he pulled Yi Qingluo into his arms with a sunken expression. Yi Qingluo knew that the don't he was referring to. Not wanting her and Zhu Wuxian to talk face to face peacefully. Feeling the warmth from the man, Yi Qingluo automatically hugged his waist as her little hand caressed his back, placating the man as she spoke in a warm voice. "The opposite sex around me, other than a Xian who is my lover, the others can only be brothers or friends." Her words seemed as though she was explaining to Dmo Xian. In actual fact, she was saying it for Zhu Wuxian to hear. Zhu Wuxian naturally understood what she meant. His expressionless, cold face had a sliver of paleness. He was obviously expressionless, but between his brows there was a chilly intent as well as a vicious air. Her words had infuriated Zhu Wuxian. Yi Qingluo. Zhu Wuxian's voice was chilly as the edges of his thin lips were extremely cold. "Do you think that if I want you, I will allow you to be arrogant in front of me?" Dmo Xian swiftly hugged her even tighter. His peach blossom eyes revealed a solemn vigilance. It seemed to be on guard against Chu Wuxin suddenly approaching. Yi Qingluo nestled in Dmo Xian's arms, as the expression on her face was very indifferent. Looking at Zhu Wuxian's tall figure, which was emitting a cold aura, she pursed her lips slightly. "I don't have any self-righteous thoughts. I just want to tell you that your persistence is useless to me. He has already become a fool, and you are still unwilling to leave him?" A few veins appeared on Zhu Wuxin's forehead. His eyes were very cold, and the lines of his facial features were also extremely cold. As he spoke, he narrowed his cold eyes, which reflected a cold light. Dmo Xian's possessiveness towards Yi Qingluo. It was like a puppy protecting its food. There was killing intent. However, his aura was too weak. He looked like a fool. "I think you're even more foolish." Her eyes were filled with anger. She couldn't stand someone mocking Dmo Xian. Xian did it to protect me. You don't know anything." "I can also protect you." Zhu Wuxin stared into her eyes, as if he could not see the anger in her eyes. This man, was he sick in the head? No matter what she said to him, it felt like playing the lute to a cow. "I don't need your protection." Yi Qingluo no longer had the patience to continue tangling with him. She retracted her gaze and looked at Dmo Xian. "Xian, let's go." Chapter 2658. Zhu Wuxian, are you trying to threaten me? Yi Qingluo's brows creased as she looked at Zhu Wuxian with a gloomy expression. Zhu Wuxian's narrowed eyes were deep and cold. "I'm only telling you out of goodwill that this backing of yours has already been destroyed. If you're smart enough, you should think of a way to find a good next." "Next?" Yi Qingluo murmured these 2 words and suddenly laughed out loud. Her eyes were filled with ridicule. "Chu Wuxian, your persistence towards me is only because of the warmth I gave you when you were young. You," she paused, raised her eyes and looked straight at him. "There is only unwillingness." Zhu Wuxian's thin lips were still curled up. His grave and stern face was cold and had a faint trace of loneliness. "I have never said that I love you." You are mine, so you should be mine. But I'm not yours. Yi Qing Luo calmly interrupted his words. Zhu Wuxin did not speak. His hands were tightly clenched under his red robe. He couldn't describe what he was feeling right now. He felt as if a nameless flame was surging in his body, wanting to burn everything in its surroundings. Yi Qing Luo's words were too ear-piercing. It pierced his eardrums and caused waves of pain. He wanted to seal Yi Qing Luo's mouth, so that Yi Qing Luo would never be able to say anything that he didn't like to hear. Then, she would quietly stay by his side. That was enough. Why? He couldn't control his emotions. Yi Qing Luo was the only lady who could move his heart. Could it be that this was the love that Yi Qing Luo mentioned? His feelings for Yi Qing Luo were not only moved, but love? This thought caused Zhu Wuexan to be startled. His pupils dilated unconsciously. The expression on his face was a little sluggish. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she looked at Zhu Wuexan's expression, which looked as though he had seen a ghost, and couldn't be bothered to bother about him. Aren't you afraid that I will really announce DMO Xian's matter to the public? Seeing Yi Qing Luo's back view without any hesitation, Zhu Wuexan's heart shuddered as he subconsciously opened his mouth. Yi Qing Luo didn't turn back, nor did she stop her footsteps. He could only hear her cold voice, which was devoid of warmth. Just go ahead and say it. Even if Xian becomes the target of everyone, I will stay by his side and fight with him until the last moment. Zhu Wuexan couldn't say anything else. He stood there in a daze. His gaze was fixated on the direction where Yi Qing Luo had disappeared. Yi Qing Luo's figure disappeared for quite some time. Only then did Zhu Wuxin have a slight reaction. He slowly retracted his gaze, and the frost in his eyes deepened. His heart was throbbing with pain. The pain made it hard for him to stand still. It clearly belonged to him. It was clearly his. He was just a little late, his things, but for another man, denied their commitment. Zhu Wuexan's lowered eyes suddenly flashed with a sinister light. Yi Qing Luo brought along the furious DMO Xian and quickly left the mass grave. He released his perception and sensed that Zhu Wuxin hadn't chased after him. She then stopped and hugged DMO Xian. DMO Xian's face was filled with gloomy clouds. Learning from Yi Qing Luo's earlier actions, he cupped her face and directed her gaze towards himself, until he saw his own reflection in Yi Qing Luo's pupils. Only then did his anger subside slightly. Why didn't Lil Luo let me kill him? DMO Xian pinched her face, expressing his unhappiness. Lil Luo said a lot of things to him. Chapter 2659. I don't like him. DMO Xian lowered his head and unhappily rested his head on her neck. The man's warm breath sprayed on her skin. Yi Qing Luo's eyelashes trembled slightly. Trying to calm down his little heart, the small hand gently stroked the back of the man's head. Well, I don't like him either. Lil Luo can only like me, he said gloomily. Yes, only Xian. Yi Qing Luo nodded seriously. DMO Xian finally revealed a smile. He was disturbed by Zhu Wuxin. When Yi Qing Luo went to search for traces of the soul-chasing powder, he could no longer sense the soul-chasing powder. Yi Qing Luo's heart trembled slightly. Usually, the reason why he could not sense the soul-chasing powder was the only thing left was water. The soul-chasing powder was something that could last for more than 3 days upon contact. The only thing that could get rid of the soul-chasing powder was water. The soul-chasing powder melted upon contact with water. However, what worried Yi Qing Luo was the soul-chasing powder on the black thread rubbed off because the black thread drilled into the waterway? Or was it discovered by the so-called Venerable One? If it was the latter, that mysterious sovereign, and Yu would probably notice it too. Their side might also be in danger. Doesn't Lil Luo have something to do? Why aren't you leaving? DMO Xian saw Yi Qing Luo's grave expression and his shimmering peach blossom eyes floated a layer of daze. Not going. Let's go back to Qinyue clan first. Yi Qing Luo pinched the back of his hand. If it was before Dmo Xian was poisoned by the love worm, this matter, he could ask Dmo Xian for his opinion. When Dmo Xian went to the upper realm, he specially investigated the identities of Yu Ming, Yu Nu, Yu Ji, and the others, as well as the identity of the revered ones behind them. However, for the past few days, they had been showing off their affection. They had never discussed such a serious topic before. Now I want to discuss it. Dmo Xian reckoned that he didn't know anything about it. It was better to return to Joy Sect and ask Miao Yi how to get rid of the love goo. Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian had just stepped into their courtyard. She saw that Yan Xiao Yi and the rest had already set up their chairs and picked up their melon seeds, waiting for her to come back and gossip. Even the cold and aloof ghost martial artist was sitting in the corner, facing so many pairs of interested eyes. Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes and asked directly, "Where's Yi and Xian Gui?" As soon as they returned, they locked themselves in their rooms. Yan Xiao Yi glanced in the direction of Miao Yi's room, lowered her voice, and asked curiously, "What exactly happened over at the Miao tribe? From what they're saying, it seems like they're suffering the consequences of their own actions after scheming against you." Just like what they said, Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards. At this moment, it was not only Yan Xiao Yi who stood up. Even Xiao Jin and Peach couldn't help but stand up. They looked at each other in dismay. After some time, Yan Xiao Yi swallowed a mouthful of saliva and raised her thumb. "Qing Luo, beautifully done!" Covered with goo worms. "I really don't know how you came up with this idea. Your taste is just too heavy." Xiao Jin trembled as he rubbed his arms. The both of them are father and daughter. The idea was thought of by themselves. I'm merely giving them a taste of their own medicine. Yi Qing Luo gave an innocent and kind smile. Moreover, father and daughter, that might not necessarily be the case. Chapter 2660. Yi Qing Luo raised her hand and blocked Peach's action. "I'm not too sure, but you should know Miao Yi's identity, right?" Peach rubbed her nose. "You already know?" Yan Xiao Yi recalled that quiet girl. "You mean Miao Yi?" She paused and muttered softly, "Miao Yi, Miao, Rong Rong." "It can't be?" Yan Xiao Yi looked at the both of them, seeking for an answer. She saw the both of them nodding their heads. Yan Xiao Yi opened her mouth wide in astonishment. She had not expected this. That quiet girl who seemed to blend into the air was actually someone from the Miao tribe. Moreover, she was Miao Yixiong's daughter. It was no wonder that Miao Yi locked herself in her room after returning from the Miao tribe courtyard. That's right, they were saying that both of Miao Rongrong's hands were crippled. One side looked like it was cut off by a knife, while the other looked like it was bitten off by a magical beast. Xiao Jin winked at Yi Qing Luo. "Don't tell me this was done by you." Chi. Yi Qing Luo decisively betrayed her teammates, expressing that she wasn't that bloodthirsty. Chi. Xiao Jin pointed to Miao Yi's room. "Earlier I saw your Chi and followed her to Miao Yi's room." Speaking of which, ever since Miao Yi appeared, her Chi had disappeared and didn't return to the pet space. She could sense that Chi was in a safe state. She thought that Chi had bitten a disgusting human's arm and ran off to relax. She had not expected it to follow Miao Yi back. "I'll go take a look at Yi's room." Yi Qing Luo pulled Dmo Xian and was about to head over. Suddenly a tender voice rang out, "Elder sister!" Kitty Li, who had finally struggled free from Zhou Mo's embrace, pounced towards Yi Qing Luo's arms. Kitty's ears drooped down. Her tone was filled with grievance. "Sister, why ever since that frivolous man came, you don't bring me along for anything?" Saying that, she stared at Zhou Mo's direction with her watery eyes. She just stared. That white-robed young man who was originally smiling evilly suddenly froze as his expression sunk. "Little wild cat, be careful!" "What?" Kitty Lee was still in a daze, not understanding Zomo's meaning. The next moment, Kitty Lee's black cat ears twitched as her strong sense of danger made her swiftly retreated backwards before she had even pounced into Yi Qing Luo's arms. However, no matter how fast Kitty Lee was, but the remnant power of the profound energy that attacked her still swept across Kitty Lee. Kitty Lee's petite body suddenly flew backwards. Kitty! Yi Qing Luo didn't expect that the man beside her would suddenly make a move. Kitty Lee was about to fall to the ground. Yi Qing Luo's gaze turned cold as she immediately pulled DMO Xian's arm away from her waist and was about to rush over to catch Kitty Lee. A white figure was even faster than her. Kitty Lee's body softly fell into Zomo's arms. Ugh! Kitty Lee's face was slightly pale. Just the aftershock alone had already caused her to suffer some minor internal injuries. If it wasn't for the feline beast's instincts that allowed him to dodge first, he was afraid that he would lose his life there. Zomo looked at the pale expression of the girl in his arms. His usual devilish phoenix eyes were filled with a gloomy and cold intent. He clenched his fists tightly as he looked at DMO Xian with a gloomy and raspy voice. "Overlord, what do you mean by this?" It wasn't hard to tell. He was filled with rage. Yi Qing Luo was about to head over to check on Kitty Lee's condition, but her wrist was held tightly by DMO Xian. Chapter 2661. DMO Xian's hand tightened as his expression turned gloomy and his eyes were deep and cold. "Not allowed." He spat out 2 words coldly. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyes. "Xian, I'm angry." Her gaze was very calm. Her tone was very calm. On her face, there was no expression at all. DMO Xian held her hand as it trembled slightly. His deep and cold aura dropped and instead added grievance. "You can only be hugged by me. She's my sister." Yi Qing Luo flung his hand away. This time, DMO Xian didn't dare to hold her tightly. After Yi Qing Luo struggled free, she immediately walked towards Kitty Lee. She sensed that the man behind her was walking towards Kitty Lee. He also lifted his feet, trying to chase up to her, but he immediately stopped in his tracks. Yi Qing Luo didn't turn back. She knew that DMO Xian was poisoned by the love goo, which was why he was like this. But she wasn't going to leave him hanging. In future, he would still make a move on her brothers because of this. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand his attack. She must let DMO Xian know the seriousness of this matter. Walking towards Kitty Lee, Yi Qing Luo fed her a medicinal pill to treat her internal injuries. Kitty Lee nestled in Zomo's arms. Her petite body was like an obedient kitten. She sneaked a glance at DMO Xian, who was behind Yi Qing Luo. Her pale face didn't blame him, but was puzzled. "Sister, what's wrong with Overlord brother-in-law?" Everyone present could tell that something was wrong with DMO Xian. Yi Qing Luo caressed Kitty Lee's face as she gave a warm smile. "Kitty Lee, don't be afraid. There won't be a next time." Her hand had just landed on Kitty Lee's face. The surrounding air had obviously turned cold. Everyone looked towards Yi Qing Luo's back in unison, and after that, they all started to shiver. Yi Qing Luo straightened her body slightly and glanced sideways at DMO Xian. That icy cold man who was overflowing with viciousness, as though he was going to destroy the heaven and earth at the next moment, just because she had glanced at him. Instantly, he lowered his head as his anger was completely restrained. Seeing this, Zomo, who had been livid, could not continue to be angry. "What's wrong with Dizun? In order to save me, you blocked Miao Yixiong's forbidden goo technique." Yi Qing Luo's gaze swept past everyone present as her pink lips spat out the words, "Love goo." Everyone was stunned. Didn't those people say that you and Dizun are fine? How could the Overlord? No matter how strong Xian is, he's still human. Yi Qing Luo lowered her eyelids. His current situation is a little special. Don't be angry. Zhou Mo frowned as his gaze swept past DMO Xian. You're looking for Miao Yi, just to ask about the cure for the loveworm. Yes. Yi Qing Luo took a look at Kitty, Li in his arms. Bring Kitty, Li to rest for a while. When she wakes up, she'll be fine. Zhou Mo tightened his grip, took a look at Kitty Li, and then at DMO Xian. The pair of long and narrow red phoenix eyes slightly narrowed. Seeing that he is injured, I will not argue with him about hurting the little wild cat. Saying that, he carried Kitty Li and took quick steps towards his own room. Everyone finally digested this news as they sized up DMO Xian while asking carefully, Qing Luo, that Dizun is now full of possessiveness towards you? He can't see. Other than me, if you get close to me, you will be treated as an outsider. Yi Qing Luo turned around and looked at the man who had been standing silently behind her. Chapter 2662. DMO Xian drooped his head as his eyes dimmed. The glow which he brought along seemed to have disappeared at this moment. That peerless face was filled with grievance. This made Yi Qing Luo think. A dog pet which was abandoned by its owner. But although the man was feeling aggrieved, but his eyes were still staring at her without blinking. Extreme focus. Looking at her was like looking at the entire world. It was filled with attachment towards her. No matter how she looked at him, he looked a little pitiful. Yi Qing Luo's heart instantly softened. Cough, cough, cough. Why do I feel that? After the Overlord was inflicted with the love goo, he became even more oppressive. Peach's face was filled with abuse as he said that as he turned his head to one side. Originally, we were already used to being oppressed. Now we're going to be stuffed again. Yan Xiao Yi and Xiao Jin said expressionlessly as they shifted their gazes away at the same time. Yi Qing Luo ignored their teasing. She suppressed the softness in her heart, suppressing the urge to go over and rub DMO Xian's black hair, to let his eyes regain its luster. After that, she continued to look at him coldly. Come over. DMO Xian blinked as his eyes glowed slightly, as though he was surprised that his Lil Luo was calling him. Come over. Yi Qing Luo repeated. The brilliance in DMO Xian's eyes turned even brighter. He obediently walked towards Yi Qing Luo. When he reached Yi Qing Luo, he stretched out his arms to hug her. Stop! Yi Qing Luo raised her hand to stop his actions. DMO Xian's expression collapsed as he pursed his lips in grievance, as he drooped his head. The more she looked, the more he looked like a dog pet. Yi Qing Luo continued to put on a cold face. Do you know your mistake? DMO Xian stared at her face as his voice was filled with grievance. You can only be hugged by me. I don't like it. A man's voice was magnetic and pleasant to listen to, mellow and mellow like fine wine. At this moment, coupled with this grievance, it sounded like a dog pet trying to act cute and coquettish. As someone who was attracted to voices, she simply couldn't hold it in. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath to calm herself down as she continued to reason with him. The people here are all my friends, my brothers. If you hurt them, I will be very sad, very upset. Pausing for a moment, she pursed her pink lips and said, Does Xian want to see me sad and sad? DMO Xian panicked and immediately shook his head. I don't want to. Then, in order not to make me sad, not to make me upset, you must promise me that you are not to make a move on these people whom I care about. Yi Qing Luo took the opportunity to hold DMO Xian's hand. His hand was cold. He probably wanted to get closer to her. He was also afraid that she would really get angry. He had been perturbed, restless, and nervous. As a result, his hand was so cold. Yi Qing Luo's hands wrapped around his hands. Her small hands couldn't close his big palms at all. But such an action made DMO Xian's face reveal a smile. A very pure and clean smile. Ah, Xian, you haven't answered my question. Yi Qing Luo rubbed his hand, using her own warmth to warm him up. When the question was raised, Dmo Xian's smile froze. He raised his eyes and swiftly swept a glance at the few people seated around them. On discovering that there were a few men, his expression turned even uglier. He was just about to shake his head, but he met with Yi Qing Luo's slightly narrowed eyes. Lil Luo'er. Dmo Xian suppressed his voice as he felt aggrieved. Yi Qing Luo knew that after he was poisoned by the love goo, he was still unable to control himself and let others get close to her. But she had to correct this bad habit of Dmo Xian. Chapter 2663. Recalling the scene earlier when Dmo Xian made a move on Kitty Li, Yi Qing Luo hardened her heart and tried to struggle free from his hand. She was just putting on an act. Dmo Xian couldn't bear to let go of her. So after a few struggles, Yi Qing Luo was hugged tightly in Dmo Xian's arms. Although he was a man who was poisoned by the love goo, but he was extremely sensitive towards matters regarding Yi Qing Luo. He knew that if he really let Lil Luo struggle free, Lil Luo would be even angrier. He couldn't bear to make Lil Luo angry, but she didn't want Lil Luo to be snatched away. Lil Luo was his. This thought made Dmo Xian's heart twitch violently. His tall and sturdy body also trembled for a moment. What's the matter? Yi Qing Luo nestled in his arms and could clearly feel his body's reaction as she immediately raised her head and asked worriedly. Dmo Xian still had that aggrieved expression. The gaze in his peach blossom eyes was exactly the same as a dog-type pet. He shook his head as though the reaction in his heart earlier was just an illusion. His eyes were fixated on her as he spoke with grievance. I don't want Lil Luo to be sad, upset. That look really made Yi Qing Luo unable to control herself. Her eyes softened as she stretched out her hand and rubbed his head gently. I can't bear to make Xian angry, so I will try my best to avoid having too much contact with him. But Xian must promise me that he will not make a move without my permission. Dmo Xian lowered his body so that her hand could easily rub his head. This action once again made Yi Qing Luo turn cute. Her Xian. He was really becoming more and more like a dog-type pet. Was he planning to develop towards the direction of a loyal dog? Just as Yi Qing Luo's young lady's heart was overflowing, a man's low and hoarse grievance voice was heard, and, I won't make a move, Lil Luo, or don't be angry with me. That grievance made Yi Qing Luo's eyes filled with a smile. She held Dmo Xian's face and pinched his face, not angry, but, earlier you hurt my sister. My sister is also your sister, so I must punish you. Sister. Dmo Xian muttered these two words in a low voice, as if he did not understand the profound meaning behind it. Following that, he raised his head again as his eyes filled with deep emotions congealed on Yi Qing Luo. I don't want a sister. I only want Lil Luo Silly. Yi Qing Luo was overjoyed. This man, after being poisoned by the love goo, he kept saying sweet nothings one after another. However, no matter how alluring her beauty was, the punishment that should be given must be given. Only in this way would Dmo Xian have a good memory, and most importantly, it was not convenient for her to let Dmo Xian follow. As a result, everyone's faces were filled with shock, their eyes were blinded by the light, and their mouths were agape with shock. Yi Qing Luo held Dmo Xian's hand as they walked towards the direction of Miao Yi's room. He stood in front of Miao Yi's room. Yi Qing Luo pushed Dmo Xian to a position. Stand here, wait for me to come out. No. Dmo Xian's eyes widened as he quickly diffused the mist. But before he could finish his words, Yi Qing Luo had already interrupted his rejection. I'm in the room. Stay here, and you can sense my presence. Don't move, don't go in. Dmo Xian felt even more wronged. Chapter 2664. In the end, Mo Xian felt wronged as he watched Yi Qing Luo walk into Miao Yi's room. He was like a large scale dog pet. He stood obediently at the spot where Yi Qing Luo had sat, not moving an inch. His eyes also stared unblinkingly at the tightly shut door. He was extremely focused, as though he had already seen the person he wanted to see through the door. Yi Qing Luo pushed the door open and just closed it. A furry little thing pounced on her. Master, a child's crisp voice was filled with joy. Yi Qing Luo rubbed Chi-Chi's little head. Why did you sneak back with E, not waiting for me? Chi-Chi shook its little head and its tail kept swaying. Master, do you know who Chi-Chi discovered? Hee. Chi-Chi was rarely so excited. She remembered the last time she was this excited was when she met Raging Flame. Qing Luo. Miao Yi's hoarse voice was heard from the bed under the veil. Apparently she had just cried. Yi Qing Luo stroked Chi-Chi, indicating that whatever it was, they could talk about it later. Following that, she put Chi-Chi down and slowly walked towards the bed. Are you very sad? Under the veil, Miao Yi's figure looked extremely slender. Miao Yi sobbed slightly and said in a hoarse voice, not sad, just, I can't understand why they want to treat me like this. Can you lift the veil? Yi Qing Luo's knees pressed against the side of the bed. Miao Yi was stunned for a moment. Her little body shrunk and said, just don't laugh at me. Yi Qing Luo lifted the veil and hung it on both sides of the bed. Miao Yi curled up at the foot of the bed, leaning against the wall and hugging her knees. Her pair of eyes were all red. Her eyelashes were stained with a patch of moisture. The little girl looked especially fragile at this moment. She was after all just a young lady in her teens. Being treated like this by her own father and sister, how could she walk out so easily? Qing Luo. Miao Yi raised her head and looked at her with red eyes. I am obviously the direct bloodline of the Miao tribe. My venom is obviously not any worse than Miao Rongrong. Why did he never put me in his eyes? Miao Yi couldn't understand. Her so-called father had plotted and schemed to kill her. He wanted her to give up her seat to Miao Rongrong. Her so-called elder sister had treated her as an enemy from the very beginning. For the sake of kinship, she had given everything to Miao Rongrong. But in the end, the result was that the father and daughter had conspired to kill her. Today, he saw Miao Yixiong get the Dizun for Miao Rongrong. Miao Yixiong didn't hesitate to use the ancestors' forbidden technique to deal with Yi Qing Luo. Moreover, when she appeared in front of him after escaping from death, what she got was not her father's concern. It was Miao Yixiong who was filled with rage. He should have given up hope long ago. However, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Yi Qing Luo opened her arms wide as she smiled warmly. Since they don't want you, then love yourself well and bring out your best self, to make him regret that he didn't choose you back then. Miao Yi looked at Yi Qing Luo for some time. He threw himself into her arms. The little person seemed to have finally found someone to rely on. Her tears quickly dyed Yi Qing Luo's clothes. Yi Qing Luo comforted her gently. From today onwards, no matter if it's Miao Yixiong or Miao Rongrong, their existence represents a joke. Now, it's time for you to prop up the Miao Gu family. Chapter 2665. You think I'm joking? Yi Qing Luo tapped her forehead. Where's the lofty aspiration from before? Where's the self-confidence that you can do better than them? Miao Yi's little hands curled up nervously. I haven't received any special training. I'm afraid As long as you have the heart for the Miao Gu family, you can do anything well. Yi Qing Luo was like a big sister as she comforted her gently. I've spared their lives. Don't tell me. Don't you want them to regret how they treated you? Miao Yi's eyes lit up slightly. The ancient Gu worm is willing to form a contract with you. That proves your ability. Don't the Miao Gu family's sacred lady mainly choose the ancient Gu worm? Yi Qing Luo slowly shifted Miao Yi's body away. She lowered her head as her charming eyes looked at Miao Yi. Think about Grandpa Boo and Grandma Boo who died, and those people in the Boo family village. Don't tell me. You don't want to protect them? Miao Yi's body suddenly stiffened. Her beautiful eyes flickered. 1 month later, I'll hand Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong over to you. You just have to think of what to do. Yi Qing Luo smiled lightly, not forcing her to make a choice now. In Miao Yixiong's courtyard, Miao Yi's hot-blooded confidence. It was all triggered by Miao Yixiong's cruelty and the disappointment towards him. Now, I need your help on one more matter. Yi Qing Luo looked at the direction of the tightly shut room door, thinking of that man like a loyal dog, standing obediently at the door. She couldn't help but smile. Miao Yi looked over in puzzlement. Other than the tightly shut room door, there was nothing else. You want me to accompany you to the West Continent to help your friend suppress the goo poison? Miao Yi retracted her gaze as she asked. This matter, let's talk about it 1 month later. Yi Qing Luo shook her head. It's Xian, he's affected by the love goo and he's not normal now. And he's also poisoned by the centrifugal goo. I'm worried something will happen. Overlord isn't unaffected by the goo poison. How could he? Miao Yi was stunned. Yi Qing Luo's expression sunk slightly. His identity is special. This matter cannot be known to others. Miao Yi's expression turned serious as well. The venerable Dizun was poisoned by the love curse and the centrifugal curse. Is he only affected by the love curse? Yi Qing Luo nodded as she narrated Dmo Xian's current situation in a concise and comprehensive manner. Miao Yi's expression became more and more solemn. Maybe the Dizun's body is different from ordinary people, and the goo worms affect him, but he can still retain some of his consciousness. After a pause, she frowned. If the love goo affects our Dizun, then the centrifugal goo will definitely do the same. This is going to be troublesome. Do you have any ideas? Since it's the ancestors' forbidden venomous spell, your Miao tribe's ancestors' side would definitely have a way to counter it, right? Yi Qing Luo's heart jolted as she asked anxiously. Miao Yi muttered to herself for a moment as she raised her eyes and met Yi Qing Luo's charming eyes seriously. Qing Luo, I will take part in the Sacred Maiden selection 1 month later to become the Miao tribe's Sacred Maiden. As long as I become the Sacred Maiden, I will be able to enter the Sacred Maiden Pavilion. Over there are all the Miao tribe's venomous spells for the past few hundred years. I will definitely find a way to counter the venomous spell for the Overlord. If it was before, she still had some resistance towards the Miao tribe's Sacred Maiden. Then now, for Yi Qing Luo, for the Overlord, she must become the Miao tribe's Sacred Maiden. Chapter 2666. Miao Yi lowered her head dejectedly. Only the Saintess Pavilion can find a way to cure the goo. I don't know any other way. Different situations call for different measures. As long as there's a way, we'll just wait. Yi Qing Luo patted Miao Yi's shoulder lightly. Xian is waiting for me at the entrance. If he continues to stay, he might not be able to hold it in. I'll go out and accompany him first. Miao Yi immediately slid off the bed. Yi Qing Luo walked to the door and suddenly turned her head around, smiling at her. Now you have the motivation to struggle. For me, you must work hard to become the Miao tribe's Sacred Maiden. Yi Qing Luo said the last yo in a very mischievous manner. Miao Yi's originally grave expression immediately broke into a smile. Yes, I will work hard. Yi Qing Luo pushed open the room door and was thinking about how to appease her Xian. However, when his gaze fell on the door of the room, she was stunned. Where was that tall figure that she had made Dmo Xian stand at? Xian. Yi Qing Luo immediately opened her mouth and walked out of the courtyard in quick steps. Wasn't the current Dmo Xian very attached to her? Why did he obediently wait for her at the door again? Did something happen to Xian? This thought made Yi Qing Luo's heart thumped hard. The speed of his feet had also increased. When he rushed to the courtyard, Yan Shao-yi and the rest were still sitting there. All of them had an indescribably strange expression on their faces. Yi Qingluo didn't think too much about it as her gaze fell onto the familiar figure standing beside Gui Wu. His heart, which was hanging in the air, was finally at ease. Fortunately, he was fine. "Ah, Xian, why didn't you wait for me?" She smiled and flew towards Dmo Xian, opening her arms and circling around his waist. "Qingluo, wait." Someone wanted to say something. Yi Qingluo had yet to feel the man's warmth. Her shoulders were suddenly pressed down by someone. Then, with a strong tug, she was pulled away. "Ah, Xian!" Yi Qingluo hissed. The force on her shoulder was so strong that her face turned pale from the pain. "Impudent!" A cold voice floated down from above. The man's cold and indifferent gaze swept past Yi Qingluo coldly. "Who are you? How dare you call this lord's name directly?" Yi Qingluo's body suddenly stiffened. She suddenly raised her head, her charming eyes staring at the man in front of her. It was still the same peerless face. He still had that godlike temperament, but his aura and everything about him were different, especially that pair of peach blossom eyes that were usually filled with tenderness and affection when he looked at her. At this moment, it was extremely cruel and evil. His peach blossom eyes were still glittering to the point of being extremely bewitching. His expression was as cold as ice. From head to toe, he exuded the noble and powerful aura that only belonged to him, the venerable emperor. When he looked at her, his eyes were filled with unfamiliarity. Yi Qingluo's heart twitched violently. What's going on? She looked at Gui Wu, her heart aching. Such a gaze, she couldn't stand it, centrifugal goo. Gui Wu lightly spat out these 3 words. Centrifugal force goo. Is the venom of centrifugal force acting up? This is the centrifugal goo? Yi Qingluo's pupils contracted slightly. Looking at Dmo Xian's face, her face flushed red. She pursed her pink lips, her voice was slightly hoarse. "So he doesn't remember me, right?" Venerable Overlord loves you so much, he will definitely remember." Yan Shao-yi, who was standing by the side, opened her mouth carefully. Chapter 2667. Don't remember? The icy cold voice was emotionless. Dmo Xian lowered his eyes as he looked at the elegant young lady in front of him as his lips curled into a cold intent. "Woman, do you think this will attract the attention of this lord?" He grabbed her shoulder tightly and was about to throw her out. "This lord hates women like you the most." "Overlord." The surrounding people were shocked by Dmo Xian's action as they broke out in cold sweat. Yan Shao-yi and Xiao Jin couldn't be bothered about the cold and overbearing Overlord in front of them. They directly pounced towards Yi Qingluo's direction, afraid that Dmo Xian would really throw Yi Qingluo out. But just as Dmo Xian was about to throw the woman who didn't know what's good for her, Dmo Xian's body suddenly froze. His eyes stared at Yi Qingluo without blinking. His brows creased slightly. Why? He actually couldn't bear to do it? His heart felt as though it was pricked by a needle. "Overlord, don't be rash, don't be rash." Dmo Xian's days allowed Yan Shao-yi to successfully pull Yi Qingluo out from his hands. Yan Shao-yi blocked Yi Qingluo behind her as she gave a flattering smile. Dmo Xian didn't even look at Yan Shao-yi. Instead, he went past Yan Shao-yi and shot straight towards Yi Qingluo. Yi Qingluo didn't move. She stood behind Yan Shao-yi in a daze. Her charming eyes looked at Dmo Xian's, obviously familiar, but at the same time emitted an unfamiliar aura. Her Ah Xian. Just half an hour ago, he was still filled with tender feelings towards her. But now, he had become so cold. Ah Xian. Her voice was a little hoarse as she looked at Dmo Xian's emotionless eyes. Qing Luo, don't open your mouth. He has forgotten about you now. Perhaps he might really make a move on you. Xiao Jin pulled her along as he quickly walked behind Gui Wu. With Gui Wu around, Dmo Xian would at least give Gui Wu some face. He glanced sideways at the deathly still Yiqing Luo and immediately looked towards Dmo Xian. He's been poisoned by the loveworm. You've seen for yourself how he treats the cat. He himself can't control himself. He won't make a move on me. Even until now, Yiqing Luo still firmly believed in Dmo Xian. Earlier, Dmo Xian was obviously going to throw her out, but in the end he stopped, even though he was affected by the centrifugal goo, even if he forgot everything about her. But in the end he still loved her. Did you ask about the method to cure the goo? Gui Wu raised his head and asked in a light voice. 1 month later, St. Maiden Pavilion. Yiqing Luo stared the direction of Dmo Xian and replied, 1 month. Gui Wu muttered, before suddenly snorting, Can you tolerate him treating you like this 1 month? No, Yiqing Luo replied decisively as she clenched her fists tightly. I will not let him be like this forever. She would rather Dmo Xian be like the previous dog-type pet, with a strong possessive desire towards her. She also didn't wish for Dmo Xian's eyes to lose her existence. Yan Xiaoyi, move aside. On seeing Yiqing Luo's pair of dimmed eyes, Dmo Xian felt an indescribable frustration in his heart. He did not like this feeling at all. He did not like the feeling of his emotions being affected by a stranger. Who is she? Why did it make him feel so strongly? He must find out about this woman's origins. Dmo Xian pushed Yan Xiaoyi aside as he walked towards Yiqing Luo in big strides. Xiaoyi. The moment Xiao Jin saw Yan Xiaoyi being pushed to the side, he immediately rushed forward and supported Yan Xiaoyi. Chapter 2668. Icy cold gaze. No warmth in his tone. Yiqing Luo's heart was throbbing in pain. His 5 fingers, which were hanging by his side, gradually curled up. She looked straight into Dmo Xian's eyes. Her charming eyes were filled with emotions. Dmo Xian frowned even tighter when he saw this. He quickened his pace and walked towards Yiqing Luo. The surrounding people looked at each other in dismay. But they saw Gui Wu, who had been sitting, suddenly stood up. Gui Wu, who had been sitting, suddenly stood up. Gui Wu stood up at the right time. Coincidentally, he blocked in front of Dmo Xian. His body completely shielded Yiqing Luo behind his back. Gui Wu's expression was still calm. Overlord, I advise you to restrain your emotions, lest you do something that you will regret. Dmo Xian's footsteps paused slightly. His peach blossom eyes squinted slightly, flickering with a gloomy luster. Why, even Master Gui Wu and this group of people think that I have lost my memory? His voice was very low, revealing a trace of hoarseness, as if he was fooling around. I don't know, when did Master Gui Wu become so worldly, trying to shove a woman beside me? Gui Wu's face was still calm as he looked into Dmo Xian's eyes. If you think so, then so be it. Dmo Xian pursed his thin lips. He naturally knew Gui Wu's character. He also understood that Gui Wu would not speak up for a woman without any reason. This woman. What was her identity? Why did it seem that everyone in this courtyard was very familiar with her? Moreover, the way she looked at him. It always made him feel like being pricked by a needle. Get out of my way. Dmo Xian's eyes sunk. Gui Wu's expressionless face changed slightly. He frowned and was about to open his mouth. Behind him, a young lady's tranquil voice came. Master Gui Wu, don't worry, I believe no matter what he turns into, he will never hurt me. As the young lady spoke, she slowly walked out from behind Gui Wu. She approached Dmo Xian, extremely close, almost with both feet touching his toes. The young lady slightly raised her head, as long as she tiptoed, as long as he lowered his head. Their lips were so close that they could touch each other. their breaths entwined with each other. Dmo Xian frowned deeply, not used to being so close to others. He wanted to move his feet back, but when he smelled the fragrance on the woman's body, his body was stiff, unable to move. There was an indescribable feeling of irritation in his heart. The fragrance of the young girl lingered in his nostrils. The more he thought about it, the more strange emotions surged in his heart. Suddenly his body trembled. His heart ached as if it had been bitten by something. Ah, Xian, how did you? Yi Qing Luo noticed that Dmo Xian was in a daze for a moment. Her pupils constricted as she raised her hand to cover his face. Pa! Dmo Xian slapped her arm away. A pair of flickering purple eyes stared at Yi Qing Luo. Get lost! Don't touch me! His body was trembling incessantly. It was as if he was suppressing some kind of pain. Yi Qing Luo held onto her arm, which was already swollen from the slap, as she took a few steps back. The way Dmo Xian looked at her, it was filled with killing intent. Yes, it was the kind of killing intent that wanted to kill her. Yi Qing Luo's breathing tightened as her face turned pale. Qing Luo! The few people beside her, when they saw this scene, all had their hearts in their mouths. Miao Yi heard the commotion outside and dashed out. On seeing Dmo Xian's abnormality and Yi Qing Luo's painful and unbelievable look. Chapter 2669. Yi Qing Luo was pushed aside by Miao Yi. Miao Yi panted heavily as she held onto Yi Qing Luo's arm and pulled her to one side. Overlord is affected by the centrifugal force Gu. The centrifugal force Gu will cause the Overlord to be estranged from you, hate you, or even more, want to kill you. Until they were 10 steps away from Dmo Xian. Miao Yi then stopped in her tracks as she looked at Dmo Xian vigilantly and continued. The closer you get to him, his heart and body's love and instinct towards you will activate the centrifugal force Gu, making him want to kill you even more. Yi Qing Luo looked at Dmo Xian in a daze. Her mind was filled with Miao Yi's sentence. Want to kill you? He would kill her? He really would kill her? Ancestors' forbidden Gu art has been passed down till today. If the Overlord were to forcefully fight with the Gu worm because of you, it would cause a huge damage to his body. Miao Yi saw Yi Qing Luo's absent-minded look and immediately straightened her head as she said solemnly, Qing Luo, don't agitate the Overlord first. When I become the Sacred Maiden, I will think of ways to cure the Overlord. Yi Qing Luo's fingers tightened once again. She slowly closed her eyes as though she had used all the energy in her body to suppress the pain in her heart. After some time, she spoke out hoarsely, all right. For Ah Xian's body, in order not to agitate Ah Xian. It was just a month's time at most in order to avoid Dmo Xian and use that cold gaze to look at her. She would go and cultivate for a month, using cultivation to numb herself, using cultivation to forget Dmo Xian for a month. Don't forget, the Overlord still has the love Gu in his body. Miao Yi unceremoniously cut off Yi Qing Luo's plan. You are the object of his attachment. You must not be more than 100 miles away from him. Otherwise the love Gu in his body will be agitated. F***K. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but cursed. She clenched her fists angrily. What you mean is, not only do I have to endure his supercilious looks and his cold indifference, I also have to follow him all the time. Miao Yi was shocked by Yi Qing Luo's valiant voice. You have Master Gue Wu to protect you. The Overlord will not specially make a move on you. Yi Qing Luo's expression was gloomy as her charming eyes stared fixedly at Dmo Xian's direction. She looked into that pair of indifferent and disgusted eyes. Yi Qing Luo's hands were already clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. All right, I'll follow him. Yi Qing Luo stared at that peerless face as she gritted her teeth and said that. She had already thought about it in her heart, after Dmo Xian was cured of the goo, how she would seek revenge for all the grievances she had suffered in this 1 month. Dmo Xian, who was standing in front of Gui Wu, saw that Yi Qing Luo and Miao Yi were still chatting about something, as his expression turned increasingly gloomy. The lines on his cold face were cold and hard. His gloomy eyes swept over the two women. His gaze finally fell onto Yi Qing Luo. "I'll say it one last time. You come here." He raised his hand and pointed at Yi Qing Luo. This group of people really believed that Gui Wu was here. Did that mean he didn't dare to touch them? One by one, both of them were challenging his authority. Dmo Xian's inky eyes surged with a dark and gloomy storm, like a whirlpool, one after another. Yi Qing Luo clenched her fingers tightly. Miao Yi shook her head at her. But Dmo Xian's words were irresistible. She had already forgotten about her Dmo Xian. Chapter 2670. Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips as she remembered what Miao Yi said earlier. She took a deep breath and walked towards Dmo Xian. Suddenly, there was a hubbub from outside the courtyard. Following that, she saw 20 to 30 forces who were staying at Qinyu sect, about 50 over people, walking in from outside the courtyard. Yi Qing Luo's footsteps halted as she frowned slightly, staring at the bunch of people who had fake smiles on their faces. In her mind, for words suddenly appeared. They came with ill intentions. This group of people indeed did not come with good intentions. Moreover, their target was clear and direct. After their gazes swept past Yi Qing Luo, they all turned to look at Dmo Xian. One of the powerhouses in the Northern Waves continent, Cheng family's patriarch smiled as he bowed to Dmo Xian. Overlord. Following that, he cupped his fists towards Gui Wu, Master Gui Wu. The other 10 over people did the same. Gui Wu frowned as he stood up impatiently and left directly. He didn't give any face to these powerhouses' representatives. No one was annoyed. They were long used to Gui Wu's character. Anyway, their target wasn't Gui Wu. Overlord, I heard that you went to the Miao tribe leader's courtyard and almost fell into his trap. Fortunately, Overlord's strength is extraordinary, and you saw through the Miao tribe leader's tricks. Instead, the Miao tribe leader was devoured by his goo insect. Finishing his words, Cheng family's patriarch carefully looked at Dmo Xian's expression as he plucked up his courage and asked, Overlord shouldn't have fallen into the Miao clan leader's trap, right? This question made Yi Qing Luo's heart thumped fiercely. These people were probably here to test if Dmo Xian had been poisoned by the Miao clan's goo worm. Chu Wuexan had really spread the news of Dmo Xian being poisoned by the love goo worm? Otherwise, why would these people have the guts to test him? She immediately raised her eyes and looked at Dmo Xian. Now, Dmo Xian had lost all his memories regarding her. Then, regarding Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong's matters, did he still remember? These people, when they asked, if Dmo Xian's answer was slightly wrong, it would make this group of astute monkey-like representatives to detect some clues. Yi Qing Luo wanted to interrupt. However, he was interrupted by a cold voice. I'm fine. The cold words were filled with majesty. There was something called an aura spreading out in the surroundings. For no reason, more than 50 people felt a chill run down their spines. The Cheng family's patriarch swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The immense pressure was so great that he couldn't even stand steadily. However, he recalled the words that person had whispered in his ear. If he didn't follow that person's arrangements and push forward this drama, he absolutely wouldn't be able to live. At this moment, no matter how scared the Cheng family patriarch was, he had to summon up his courage and continue to ask, Overlord, it's better to let the elders of the Miao tribe examine you. You are a noble person. If something happens to you in the northern continent and this news spreads out, how will the people of the northern continent behave? An ice-cold gaze instantly fell on the head of the Cheng family. The head of the Chung clan shuddered, and his legs almost turned to jelly. We are just concerned about your health. DMO Xian suddenly laughed. His thin, rosy lips curled into a cold, murderous arc. His long and narrow peach blossom eyes looked even more devilish at this moment, but it made one's heart turn cold. Laughing so hard that the Chung family patriarch couldn't withstand this pressure. With a plop, he knelt down. Chapter 2671. DMO Xian, Chung family's patriarch, and the rest turned pale and broke out in cold sweat. How dare a puny Miao Yisheng scheme against me? DMO Xian raised his eyebrows with a faint smile. Do you think that I haven't appeared in Nirvana realm for a long time and you can overturn the heavens? All the representatives had no more confidence at this moment. Qing family's patriarch was so scared that he almost cried out, DMO Xian, I'm stupid. I didn't mean it. I was just worried about DMO Xian. I shouldn't have speculated about DMO Xian's body. I know I'm wrong. DMO Xian curled his devilish eyes and sneered. I'm not interested to know whether it was intentional or not, but you made me feel very unhappy. The last 5 words. He spat them out almost word by word. It was like a voice from hell demanding for their lives. The representatives of the various superpowers were so shocked that they found it difficult to even breathe. Thump! Thump! Instantly all the people kneeled on the ground. DMO Xian was indeed unhappy. From head to toe, it was obvious that he was unhappy. He still wanted to catch that woman who made his emotions restless, if that woman could really affect his emotions. Then he would kill her directly to get rid of any future troubles. This group of people actually came to disturb him. DMO Xian's eyes suddenly turned fierce, and he swept his sleeves. Immediately, a powerful and majestic, profound qi turned into a hurricane, and in a split second, it had directly struck Chung family's patriarch. Chung family's patriarch let out a scream and flew out. The terrifying, profound qi brought along a bone-piercing chill. The aftershock overturned the surrounding people who were kneeling down. Those people were scared out of their wits and knelt on the ground, kowtowing fiercely. DMO Xian's palm was powerful, but it didn't directly take Chung family's patriarch's life. Just that, Chung family's patriarch, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. Chung family's patriarch spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs were churning with a fishy sweetness and sharp pain. He stared at DMO Xian in disbelief. I'm the patriarch of Chung family. If you kill me, Chung family, Northern Waves continent, will not let you off. His words made the faces of the representatives of the surrounding forces that had followed him turn even paler. They hurriedly kept their distance from the Chung family. Could it be that the head of the Chung family had been beaten senseless? How dare he speak to the Overlord in such a tone? Lord Dizun even dared to destroy the Northern Wave royal family and the Battle King's residence. Why would I be afraid of a small Qing family? Before coming, the representatives of these forces were indeed hoping for a fluke. If the Overlord was really poisoned, they seized the opportunity to take the Dizun hostage and take away his power. But now everyone could see that. The Overlord who had such a strong aura, how could he have been poisoned? It's all that damned Chung family's patriarch's fault. He had instigated them to cause trouble for His Majesty. Everyone cursed Chung family's patriarch 100 times in their hearts. They couldn't wait for DMO Xian to flatten the Chung family, and then let them off. I'm very curious. If I kill you, what will the Northern Waves continent do? Won't they let me off? DMO Xian smiled coldly. Immediately, he waved his palm again. That palm turned into a horrifying air wave. It fell straight on Chung family's patriarch's chest. Chung family's patriarch didn't even have time to scream. Chapter 2672. Even the representatives who were used to seeing bloodshed couldn't suppress the fear in their hearts. They were afraid that the next moment the person who turned into minced meat would be them. That's right, the person in front of them. He was rumored to be a temperamental, decisive legend. The Overlord. In this Nirvana realm, no one could resist the Overlord if he wanted to kill anyone. What was wrong with their brains? They actually followed Chung family's patriarch to test the Overlord. Whether he was poisoned by the Miao tribe's venom. Such a powerful Overlord. How did he look like someone who was poisoned? The group of people knelt together as they trembled in fear, begging for Mo Xian's forgiveness. Suddenly, one of the representatives saw someone from the corner of his eyes. His eyes lit up as he crawled towards that direction. Miss Yi, I beg you to persuade the Overlord. We know we're wrong. We shouldn't be blinded by greed. Everything is Chung family's patriarch's fault. When one of them knelt down and begged Yi Qing Luo. When the others saw this, they seemed to have found the only way out as they swarmed towards Yi Qing Luo. Miss Yi, I beg you to persuade the Overlord. As long as you speak, the Overlord will let us off. Even if we have to work like cows or horses, we will repay Miss Ye's kindness. These people were very clear. How much did the Overlord dote on Yi Luo? It was said that a lady's heart was the softest. As long as Yi Luo was willing to speak for them, the Overlord would definitely let them off for Yi Luo. Everyone treated Yi Qing Luo as their only hope. But no one noticed Yi Qing Luo's slightly pale face. Yi Qing Luo looked at the group of people in front of her as she resisted the urge to kick them all out. But at the same time, she couldn't help but to sneak a peek at Mo Xian, the current Mo Xian. He couldn't remember who she was. This group of people were begging her for help. If Mo Xian made her lose her face on the spot, then he would draw a clear line between them. If this was spread out, she was already tired of being played with by the Overlord and was abandoned. This bit of gossip to her didn't matter at all. This was considered as the best outcome. But if someone with ulterior motives found out, then the consequences would be severe. How would Mo Xian choose? It had been a long time since Yi Qing Luo was this anxious. But even after a long while, Mo Xian did not open his mouth. He just used that pair of indifferent peach blossom eyes to stare at her unblinkingly. It was as if he wanted to see through her shell and into her soul. The voices of the representatives of the various factions pleading for leniency kept ringing in his ears. Yi Qing Luo pressed the area between her eyebrows, which was throbbing in pain as she took a deep breath. Her charming eyes flickered with a calm glint as her voice remained calm. There's no use in begging me. You should be very clear that the Overlord's decision will not change because of anyone. When the last word fell, Yi Qing Luo's slender fingers unconsciously curled up a little. Miss Yi, you're different. The Overlord dotes on you so much. As long as you ask, he will definitely let us go. This was the only way for them to survive. These people naturally wouldn't give up just because of Yi Qing Luo's rejection. Yi Qing Luo's pink lips pursed as she opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. If it was a normal day, she might as well send them flying with a kick. She couldn't be bothered to listen to their pleas for help. But now it concerned Mo Xian. Chapter 2673. Yi Qing Luo was still thinking of the best countermeasure in her mind. Suddenly, there was a sound of cold air being sucked in from the surrounding. Yi Qing Luo was stunned and seemed to have thought of something as she turned her head sideways. Sure enough, she saw a noble man dressed in a flowing purple robe walking over gracefully. As the man walked, the purple robe swayed with an overbearing pressure. It made the various powerhouses' representatives who were kneeling around Yi Qing Luo started to crawl to one side, opening up a path. The man's footsteps were slow and heavy. He walked all the way to Yi Qing Luo before he stopped. The familiar and elegant sandalwood scent seeped into Yi Qing Luo's nose. Yi Qing Luo's heart suddenly tightened. You Her pink lips moved slightly as she nervously pursed them. Her enchanting eyes fell on the man's body without blinking. He suddenly walked over. What did he mean? Not allowing Yi-Ching Luo to think too much, her shoulder was suddenly hooked firmly by a strong and powerful arm. Following that, Yi-Ching Luo was pulled into a warm and broad embrace. The man's sandalwood scent assaulted her nostrils. It made Yi-Ching Luo's heart palpitate nonstop. Beside her ear, the man's voice seemed to be soaked in wine. As long as you say it, I will definitely let them off. He laughed softly. His laughter was filled with infinite ridicule. Yi-Ching Luo's heart, which was beating faster because of his embrace, at this moment returned to peace. Her petite body stiffened slightly as she raised her head from his embrace. She met with that pair of peach blossom eyes which were filled with foolishness. For pairs of eyes met. DMO Xian's arm suddenly increased the strength as he tightened his grip on Yi-Ching Luo's shoulder. His voice became even lower. Why? Never thought that your lies to the outside world would be exposed in front of me? Yi-Ching Luo was stunned. He thought that this group of people would plead with her and persuade him. Just because she deliberately didn't have any bottom line and announced to the outside world that their relationship wasn't shallow? She obviously knew that he didn't remember her, which was why he did this. But Yi-Ching Luo's heart would still feel a throbbing pain which made her legs go weak for a moment. DMO Xian's hand tightened around her, putting all of Yi-Ching Luo's weight on his body. What followed was his mocking laughter by her ear. What? Feeling guilty? Yi-Ching Luo's complexion paled by a few shades. The crowd by the side only saw the intimate interaction between DMO Xian and Yi-Ching Luo. How could she feel that the atmosphere between the two of them was completely different from the sweet love they used to have? They felt that they had asked the right person. Immediately, all of them started to beg Yi-Ching Luo once again. DMO Xian didn't even bother to look at them as his gaze was locked onto Yi-Ching Luo's face. His black pupils flashed with a gloomy light. Bit by bit it flickered. This face, compared to the women who had tried to seduce him in the past, he was definitely not good-looking. However, it had an indescribable attraction to him. It made him do things that even he himself couldn't believe. For example now, walking to her side and hugging her in his embrace. Miss Yi, I'm begging you, please help us plead for leniency. We will do our best to repay you. This time Chung family's matter, we will also join hands to settle it and not let the Overlord be affected at all. Those people were desperately begging for help. This was their only chance. They all wanted to live on. Chapter 2674. Not to let DMO Xian be affected at all, which meant they would join hands and push the blame of Chung family's patriarch's death onto herself. This was the best-case scenario. The current DMO Xian was being corroded by the centrifugal worm. They didn't know if the centrifugal worm would cause DMO Xian to have any other strange reactions. If Chung family really wanted to find DMO Xian for Chung family's patriarch's death, the risk was too huge. It was hard to guarantee that DMO Xian wouldn't be detected. She clenched her fingers, but didn't shift her gaze away as she looked at him. Silence. The strange atmosphere lingered between the two of them. Everyone had finally recovered some rationality from the fear of death. They had also finally sensed the strange atmosphere. Momentarily, they all shut their mouths, although they didn't speak. But their peripheral vision would occasionally glance at DMO Xian and Yi-Ching Luo. They were all guessing in their hearts. This Yi Luo, the Overlord, had threatened to pamper her till she was out of control. Could it be that she quarreled with the Overlord? Just as everyone was wondering if they should go and beg the Overlord for help, a voice suddenly rang out. They saw the Overlord suddenly hooking his arm around Yi-Ching Luo's slender waist as a teasing smile surfaced on his peerless face. If Lil Luo personally pleads for you, I will naturally let you off. Not knowing why, the moment he saw Yi-Ching Luo He wanted to call her name. Lil Luo, these 3 words blurted out. But it didn't hinder him from continuing to act according to this young lady's script. When the 3 words Lil Luo came out from DMO Xian's mouth, Yi Qing Luo's pupils subconsciously constricted. He still knew to call her Lil Luo. The man met Yi Qing Luo's astonished gaze as his thin lips curled upwards. He was still smiling evilly. His slender fingers lifted the young lady's chin. He bent his head and got close to her. His voice was bewitching and alluring. After all, you are this lord's beloved woman. He intentionally emphasized the word beloved. Others couldn't tell, but Yi Qing Luo absolutely could tell. He was mocking her for overestimating herself. Yi Qing Luo's fingers trembled. Then she lowered her head, avoiding DMO Xian's oppressive gaze as she moved her lips. And then I'll take it that you've let them off. This group of people had little to do with her, but after all, they were the representatives of the major powers from all over the world. If all of them died in DMO Xian's hands, even if they were afraid of DMO Xian's strength, DMO Xian's actions had incurred the wrath of the masses. It would more or less affect DMO Xian. Before Miao Yi found a way to cure the goo, she could not allow DMO Xian to appear in front of the public, especially in front of those forces that had a grudge against the imperial palace. Thinking of this, Yi Qing Luo didn't even bother to take a look at DMO Xian, but instead pulled away the hand that was wrapped around her waist. She looked at the people kneeling on the ground and said indifferently, "Still not going to scram?" Everyone was stunned as they quickly looked at DMO Xian. When they realized that DMO Xian wasn't even looking at them, one by one they crawled up from the ground and ran out of the courtyard. Remember, Chung family's matter has nothing to do with the Overlord. Otherwise, Yi Qing Luo didn't finish her sentence, but the threat in her tone was obvious. Yes, Miss Yi, we absolutely don't dare. Don't dare. Chapter 2675. Yi Qing Luo calmly turned around and raised her eyes to look at DMO Xian. Her lips curled into a sweet smile. That's natural. After all, I'm your beloved woman. DMO Xian's brows sunk suddenly. That mouth of his was quite sharp. She actually used the same words to block his words. His gaze went past Yi Qing Luo, looking at those fleeing figures. A murderous intent flashed past his eyes. He didn't like the feeling of being controlled by others, especially when it was controlled by this young lady who made him feel different. She wanted him to let those people go. Then he would not let them go. An evil smile overflowed from DMO Xian's brows. He raised his hand and profound qi expanded, turning into billowing air waves as it shot out. Just at this moment, a soft little hand suddenly pressed down on his arm. That hand was as soft as a ball of cotton. It looked like it had no strength at all. However, she forcefully pushed his hand back. The sudden surge of terrifying, profound energy was actually suppressed by this little hand for no reason. DMO Xian's entire body froze. His eyes were gloomy and his expression was getting colder and colder. From the corner of his eyes, he looked at his suppressed hand. Damn it! Who on earth was this young lady? How dare she provoke his prestige time and time again? Did she really treat herself as his beloved concubine? For this lord, DMO Xian, who had just spat out these 3 words, had no chance to continue. His lips were ruthlessly sealed by a pair of warm lips. Yi Qing Luo's one hand pressed on DMO Xian's hand. The other hand hooked onto DMO Xian's neck. Tiptoeing, bit by bit, she kissed him in the way that DMO Xian once kissed her. The young lady's sweetness and fragrance made DMO Xian unable to react in time to push her away. On the contrary, he felt a trace of a very familiar smell, so familiar that, in his mind, a faint silhouette appeared. As if before this, He had once kissed a lady so intimately. That silhouette gradually became clearer. Vaguely, he seemed to see a devastatingly beautiful face. Oh! Suddenly, D.M.O. Chien felt a sharp pain in his heart. The images in his mind suddenly dispersed. He suddenly pushed the girl in front of him away. His tall body staggered back a few steps. He stared at Yi Qing Luo, as though he was looking at another person through Yi Qing Luo. His body could not help but tremble. Ripples of light surged in his black peach blossom eyes, like tumbling whirlpools. Wave after wave, it was unstoppable. He tried to recall the outline he had just remembered, but the more he thought about it, his heart ached even more. This kind of pain was not physical pain. Instead, it was a soul-tearing pain. His body seemed to be unable to control itself. Ah, Xian! After Yi Qing Luo was pushed away, looking at D.M.O. Chien in front of her, her heart felt as though it was being strangled by something unbearably tight. Qing Luo, come back! Miao Yi grabbed hold of Yi Qing Luo's hand in time. The centrifugal venom is fighting with his consciousness. It should be that kiss of yours earlier which made his memories of you return. Yi Qing Luo's pupils constricted. Even a breath made her heart ache. Then what should we do? The Overlord's willpower will absolutely be able to withstand the centrifugal venom. Don't worry. When Miao Yi said the sentence, she actually had no confidence in her heart. Towards the ancestors' forbidden venom, she didn't understand much. Chapter 2676. Yi Qing Luo's heart wrenched, especially when she saw D.M.O. Chien's red eyes. His facial features were slightly distorted due to the pain. Her heart skipped a beat. She had used up all her energy. Then she suppressed herself and rushed towards D.M.O. Chien. She knew that the closer she got to D.M.O. Chien, it would only cause him more pain. Through the centrifugal worm, I am even more certain that the Overlord's love for you is really. Miao Yi looked at D.M.O. Chien and struggled for a long time, unable to find an adjective. Finally, she spat out 4 words. No one can compare to him. Yes, no one could compare to him. No one could compare to D.M.O. Chien's love for Yi Qing Luo. The centrifugal worm not only makes the Overlord forget about you, but also makes him more and more distant from you, and even has murderous intent towards you. And until now, although he is very cold towards you, but his subconscious, his body, even his soul, are all uncontrollably in love with you. Miao Yi sighed as she looked at Yi Qing Luo. If it was anyone else like me or any other woman in this courtyard who dared to use his name to show off, dare to get close to him, dare to touch him, would definitely be dismembered by the Overlord. Without hesitation, Miao Yi's words were definitely not a casual, comforting remark. It was the real truth. The Overlord would absolutely not allow any woman to get close to him. Even Fengling, who was once spread by numerous people in Nirvana Realm to be the future mistress of the Imperial Palace, was not allowed to get too close to D.M.O. Chien. Even if she got close, that was on account of the Imperial Palace's granny. It could be said. Over at D.M.O. Chien, who had forgotten about Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo was the first so daring to touch him and even molest him as a stranger. Obviously, he would have a strong murderous intent towards Yi Qing Luo, but it was because of D.M.O. Chien's love. Forcefully suppressed those murderous intents. This was enough to show how deep D.M.O. Chien's love for Yi Qing Luo was. Ugh. Ugh. Suddenly, D.M.O. Chien's pupils contracted. One hand clutching his heart, his body fell backwards, and just like that he fell straight down. Ah, Chien! Yi Qing Luo was horrified by what she saw, as a feeling of needles piercing densely into her heart, spreading to her limbs and bones. She couldn't hold back any longer. She shook off Miao Yi's hand and flew forward. Ah, Chien! Ah, Chien! Yi Qing Luo hugged D.M.O. Chien's head with one hand as she looked at his extremely pale complexion, as her eyes turned red. D.M.O. Xian shut his eyes, and between his brows there were several layers of wrinkles. Clearly, even though he had fainted, he was still suffering. Ah, Xian, what's the matter with him? Yi Qing Luo speedily turned her head around and looked at Miao Yi. Miao Yi was also shocked by Mo Xian's sudden fainting. Meeting with Yi Qing Luo's pair of eyes, which were filled with worry, he stammered, Maybe it's because of resisting against the centrifugal force Gu, exhausting all his energy. He'll be fine after a short rest." Yi Qing Luo held Mo Xian's hand tightly as she looked at Mo Xian. Her reddened eyes turned even redder. "Send the Overlord back to his room to rest." Suddenly, a calm and deep voice was heard, revealing an unquestionable pressure. It was Ghost Marshal. Chapter 2677. Yi Qing Luo was stunned as her gaze swiftly swept to the side. Sensing that the courtyard had already been sealed off by the Ghost Marshal Sect's spirit formation, the Ghost Marshal Sect's spirit formation started to tremble. Only then did she react. "Master Gui Wu, thank you." Yi Qing Luo took a look at Xiao Jin, carry him back to the room. Just now, the people from those forces had indeed fled very quickly. However, this did not mean that no one would be crowding around the courtyard, looking around. If not for the Ghost Marshal Technique's spirit formation, which had covered up everything that had happened in the courtyard, the Ghost Marshal Technique would not have been able to see it. Just like the atmosphere between Mo Xian and Yi Qing Luo earlier, Mo Xian had already fainted. It would definitely set off a wave in the Nirvana realm. With the help of Xiao Jin, very quickly, they returned to Mo Xian and Yi Qing Luo's room. Everyone could tell that earlier the battle between Mo Xian and the centrifugal force worm had already made Yi Qing Luo extremely worried. Naturally, he would not disturb the two of them. The two of them left the room one by one. The unconscious Mo Xian was restless. To be more precise, he was still fighting against the goo worm in his body while he was unconscious. Yi Qing Luo's heart ached incomparably, as she had been busy taking care of and comforting Mo Xian by his bedside. It was until the hour of the Yin, which was about 3 or 4 in the morning, when she laid down on the side of the bed, holding on to Mo Xian's hand, and fell into a deep sleep. In a daze, she felt cold, but soon his body seemed to be dragged up by something. She tried to open her eyes. However, the heaviness of her eyelids and the familiar scent of sandalwood made her unable to raise her guard. Warmth covered her. In an instant, her entire body felt cold. After an unknown period of time, when Yi Qing Luo woke up, it was already bright outside. The piercing light made her raise her hand to rub her eyes. But when he moved, only then did he realize that he couldn't move his hand at all. It wasn't just the hands. Her entire body was wrapped in the embrace of a burning hot, muscular body. The elegant sandalwood fragrance lingered in the air. She blinked her charming eyes and raised her head in a daze, only to see the sleeping face that was as handsome as a god. "Ah, Xian." Yi Qing Luo's eyes lit up slightly. Yesterday, she had accompanied Mo Xian back to his room, and it was only until the wee hours before she fell asleep. She still remembered. He was just lying on the edge of the bed, pretending to be asleep. Why was it that, at this moment, she was on the bed and was even encircled in Mo Xian's arms? When did her vigilance and perception become so weak? Looking at the still unconscious Mo Xian, the image in her mind was of him looking at her with a cold and indifferent gaze. She stayed in Xian's arms. Wouldn't that make the centrifugal goo even more violent? Xian had fought against the centrifugal goo for so long. You must be very tired. He could not let him continue to waste his energy. Yi Qing Luo's breathing tightened. She immediately and carefully removed the hands around her waist and was about to get up. However, the hand on her waist suddenly tightened its grip. She abruptly fell back onto the soft bed. Her little face bumped into the man's hard chest. Little Luo, the hoarse voice of the man who had just regained consciousness was transmitted into Yi Qing Luo's ears. This cry soothed Yi Qing Luo's body almost went soft. The man bent his waist slightly as he tightened his grip on the person in his arms. His warm breath sprayed onto her exposed skin. He even panted slightly, "Little Luo, don't move," as his words left his mouth. Chapter 2678. Yi Qing Luo's delicate body suddenly trembled. The familiar gentleness and the affectionate kiss from the man made her momentarily forget to struggle. "Ah, Xian!" she gasped and called out his name in disbelief. "Little Luo, I'm here." His low and hoarse voice murmured indistinctly. Yi Qing Luo's trembling intensified. DMO Xian's voice at this moment had really. She was unable to control herself. Oh, DMO Xian seemed to be following his instinct, trying to ease the discomfort in his body after he opened his eyes. His hand instinctively locked onto Yi Qing Luo's petite body, until the man's large palm touched a certain spot. Yi Qing Luo, who was still in a daze, suddenly widened her eyes and panted, pushing away the man's pressing chest. "Xian, you calm down." The current DMO Xian. Clearly, he had switched back to the love goo in his body. A pair of aggrieved eyes, like those of a large puppy, looked at her pitifully. That pair of peach blossom eyes were currently tinged with some sort of emotion. He looked exceptionally demonic. It was extremely enchanting. He could force a young girl from a good family to turn into a wolf in a matter of minutes. Yi Qing Luo swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forcibly suppressed the urge to be teased by the man. "Xian, you've just woken up. I'll get someone to fetch water. You can take a bath." "No." DMO Xian's hoarse voice carried a hint of coquettishness. He covered Yi Qing Luo once again. His hands encircled her, as if his body could only feel a trace of comfort when he touched Yi Qing Luo's delicate body. However, this was not enough. It was far from enough. "Xian." Yi Qing Luo increased her strength as she pushed him. In DMO Xian's body, there was not only one kind of love, goo poison. What if she couldn't control herself and was unable to extricate herself from DMO Xian's charm? DMO Xian was knocked down. After activating the venom of centrifugal force, wouldn't DMO Xian suffer again? At this critical juncture, he absolutely had to hold on. Yi Qing Luo shut her eyes and hardened her heart, avoiding the temptation of DMO Xian's beauty. "Lil Luo, don't push me. I'm uncomfortable. Want Lil Luo." DMO Xian's hoarse voice sounded aggrieved as he kept on muttering softly. Yi Qing Luo forcefully pried his hand away. "I'll feel better after the bath." When men woke up early in the morning, they would indeed have that kind of impulse. Especially like the current DMO Xian, the only thing on his mind was her. Naturally, he would not be able to restrain himself. "Lil Loa." The man's voice was even more aggrieved, like the low whine of a puppy. Yi Qing Luo's heart softened, but thinking of the centrifugal venom in his body, she could only harden her heart. "Be good. I'll help you wash. You'll feel better after washing." Finishing her words, she did not wait for DMO Xian to continue acting coquettishly. Yi Qing Luo didn't even want to look anymore. She murmured, "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Stay calm. Calm down." At the same time, he shouted towards the outside, "Get a few buckets of cold water." Very quickly, Qiao Jin and Yan Xiao carried several buckets of cold water. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's messy hair and messy clothes, he looked at her ambiguously, as though he had been through the same thing before. Yi Qing Luo's lips twitched as she blocked the entrance, not letting their line of sight into the room. Following that, she lifted a bucket of water, as her lips curled into a cold smile. "Early in the morning, and the two of you are here so quickly. Could it be that Jinzi can't do it?" Saying that, She even used her eyes to glance at Xiao Jin. Who can't do it? Xiao Jin's eyes instantly widened, as he was so angry that he clenched his teeth to refute. But the person in front of him was a young lady. Chapter 2679. If that's the case, why are you still squatting in the corner of Xian and me so early in the morning? Yiqing Luo shot a glance at Xiao Jin, looking at Xiao Jin, who was so angry that his face was flushed red. She had been suppressing the feeling of not being able to pounce on a certain evildoer, and finally felt great. Yan Xiao Yi also blushed. No matter how much she blabbered out, she couldn't be like Yiqing Luo, putting such matters at the tip of her tongue. Yiqing Luo was really vengeful. Even teasing her would result in retaliation. Yan Xiao Yi expressed that they could no longer be friends happily. After a long while, he finally said, We were worried about you." Yiqing Luo raised her brows as she listened to the man on the bed who had his mouth shut, but his breathing was getting heavier and heavier. He no longer had the mood to tease Yan Xiao Yi and Xiao Jin. He simply explained he fought with the centrifugal goo for an entire night and sweated a lot. Now he looks like he was poisoned by the love goo. I have to help him wipe his sweat. Just like this? Yan Xiao Yi squinted her beautiful eyes as she sized up the messy Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo didn't answer, but curled her lips into a brilliant smile. Not getting lost now. Are you trying to sneak a peek at my Xian's tight abs? Yan Xiao Yi. How would she dare to imagine the Overlord's abs? You're being too careless with your blackening. Xiao Jin widened his eyes. His eyes passed through Yiqing Luo and looked into the room. Then he looked at Yan Xiao Yi, who had a stiff expression. His mind was filled with the image of the Overlord's outstanding charm. Xiao Jin's expression instantly darkened. He hooked Yan Xiao Yi with one arm and directly carried her in his arms, walking back. You want to see my abs? Let's go. Let's go back to the room. I'll let you see all you want. Yan Xiao Yi. F***CK. Slut Jean. Are you a person who can be incited so easily? Sending off this pair of happy lovers, Yiqing Luo carried the cold water bucket by bucket into the room. Only then did he close the door and lock it. She placed the bathtub down and poured a bucket of water into it. On the other side of the bed, a heavy object fell to the ground with a thud. The bucket in Yiqing Luo's hand fell onto the ground. She looked back quickly. Sure enough, she saw Dmo Xian squatting beside the bed. There was a faint blush on that peerless and devilish face. His black hair was scattered over his shoulders, giving him a somewhat messy and demonic feeling. His purple robe hung loosely on his body. The waist seal was nowhere to be found. He struggled to get up from the ground. He moved. His purple robe fluttered. A large part of his chest was revealed. He could vaguely see the perfect mermaid lines. Yiqing Luo's heart pounded furiously, that restless feeling in his heart. He began to clamor for her sanity again. A monster, an absolute monster. Wasn't he afraid that she wouldn't be able to control herself and would pounce on him? Was it really okay to test her patience like this? Yiqing Luo took a deep breath and muttered, Emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. As she strode towards Dmo Xian. Xian, are you hurt anywhere? Lil Luo. Dmo Xian seemed to have finally sensed an aura that made him feel at ease, as a sliver of a smile surfaced on a thin, red, devilish face of Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo just got closer. Her wrist was grabbed by the man with great force. She fiercely rubbed into his arms. A warm and urgent kiss quickly fell on her body. Lil Luo. Don't leave me, I feel terrible. Dmo Xian was like a dog-type pet that had fallen out of favor, as he whimpered aggrievedly. Chapter 2680. Xian. Yiqing Luo's face flushed red as she held onto Dmo Xian's hand. Let's go. You will feel better soon. Dmo Xian threw a tantrum and refused to leave. Yi Qing Luo half coaxed and half dragged and finally brought DMO Xian to the side of the bathtub. As for herself, during this process, he was only left with a thin layer of clothing. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath and pointed to the bathtub. "Ah, Xian, go in. I'll help you bathe." The man who couldn't bear to leave Yi Qing Luo's soft skin let out a few whimpers from his nose. Yi Qing Luo coaxed in a low voice, "Be good. Trust me. If you don't want to feel uncomfortable, then go in." DMO Xian unwillingly lifted his leg and stepped into the bathtub. Yi Qing Luo immediately stretched out her hand and carelessly tore off the robe hanging on his body. His muscles were taut, and his body was so perfect that it made one's heart beat faster. Completely exposed in front of Yi Qing Luo's eyes. Yi Qing Luo felt that right now. Her eyes were absolutely radiating a wolf's light. She felt extremely wronged. This man clearly belonged to her, but it was right before their eyes. He could only watch, but he couldn't go overboard. It was too torturous. In order to suppress the burning flame in his heart, Yi Qing Luo lifted another bucket of water and poured it onto DMO Xian's body. DMO Xian stood in the bathtub. Droplets of water slid down along his perfect mermaid line. Lil Luo, I still feel terrible. After DMO Xian was splashed with water, he didn't feel any relief like what Yi Qing Luo had imagined. On the contrary, it seemed to be on the rise. Yi Qing Luo poured several buckets of cold water onto DMO Xian's body. Then he pressed DMO Xian down into the bathtub. He soaked in the cold water until it was almost hot. DMO Xian still had no intention of easing up. If this went on, DMO Xian might suffocate to death, right? Yi Qing Luo lowered her head as she looked at her own hands, and then at DMO Xian's flushed red face. A thin layer of sweat rolled down from his forehead. He was poisoned by the love goo. He did not know how to control himself at all, especially when he looked at Yi Qing Luo. Other than hugging Yi Qing Luo and kissing her, he followed his instincts. He couldn't think of anything. He could not hope for DMO Xian to suppress himself. Yi Qing Luo closed her eyes and put her hand into the bathtub. "Ah, Xian, be good. Don't move." By the time DMO Xian and Yi Qing Luo walked out of the room, it was already 2 hours later. Everyone was still sitting at the stone tables and chairs in the courtyard. Yen Xiao Yi and Xiao Jin were not here. Miao Yi and the others saw the two of them coming out. DMO Xian stared intently at Yi Qing Luo, as though there was no room for anyone else in his eyes, which made everyone understand. The current DMO Xian. It was DMO Xian who had been poisoned by the loveworm. The crowd heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Qing Luo walked over. "Ah, Xian's venom is too chaotic. If he continues to stay in the Qingyue clan, there will be too many mouths, and it will be easy to be discovered." The others nodded in agreement. Yi Qing Luo looked at Gue Wu. "I'm going to stay at the Peach Blossom restaurant. Peach's place is extremely secretive as long as the centrifugal venom doesn't cause any mischief, and calmly wait for a month. There should be no problem. Master Gue Wu, do you want to join us?" Before Gue Wu could say anything, Zhou Mo, who was standing by the side, suddenly pounded the table. "Of course I want to join you. Little Wildcat insists on following you. So of course I want to go." "Gue Wu." Yi Qing Luo nodded. "Then it's settled. I'll go look for Sect Master Een to bid farewell. Then contact Peach to arrange a room for you." Gue Wu. No one asked for his opinion. Yi Qing Luo had already held onto DMO Xian's arm as they walked out of the courtyard. Chapter 2681. As Yi Qing Luo walked, she reminded DMO Xian in a low voice, reminding DMO Xian to meet Yin Qinghao later. He only needed to maintain his aloofness as an overlord. Yin Qinghao was the patriarch of Qinyu clan, so he was definitely smarter and sharper than the average person. Just by looking at Qinyu clan status in the northern continent, it was obvious, especially when compared to when her scum father was still the patriarch of Three Springs sect. This further highlighted Yin Qinghao's intelligence. So, Yi Qing Luo didn't dare to belittle Yin Qinghao. She must prevent Yin Qinghao from detecting Mo Xian's abnormality. Looking at the nearer and nearer hospital admission, she took a look at Mo Xian, who was staring at her in a daze, without shifting his gaze away. Yi Qing Luo sighed as she raised her hands and cupped Mo Xian's face. She slowly tiptoed and got close to his ear. The servants and maids who were passing by saw the scene. They only felt that the scene of this golden couple displaying their affection in public was really beautiful. This society that only looked at faces, as long as they looked good. Even the public display of affection was so pleasing to the eye. Yi Qing Luo laughed softly in his ear. Looking at the man's white neck, her long and narrow eyes, flowing light flashed. Ah Xian, obediently stand beside me. I don't let you speak. Don't let you move. Don't let you move, okay? Mo Xian's arms suddenly hugged her tightly in his arms. His body was well built, and his muscles were firm and extremely hot. Yi Qing Luo's thoughts suddenly drifted to the scene of her bathing for Mo Xian when she woke up today. Her cheeks blushed slightly. She raised her hand and was about to push away Mo Xian's burning hot chest. The man's husky voice, with the taste of a puppy, rang softly. I'm obedient. Lil Luo wants to give me a reward. All right. Yi Qing Luo smiled. Her eyes curved as she tiptoed and touched his thin lips. But unexpectedly, the man whose eyes lit up when she kissed him, this time, after accepting her kiss, hugged her tightly again. After that, he looked at her seriously. The reward I want is the reward for Lil Luo, helping me bathe today. Yi Qing Luo. It took her a lot of effort to erase those images. Now that he mentioned it again, was he doing it on purpose? Since when did her family's pet learn to be bad? Lil Luo. Help me bathe. It's very comfortable. I want more. Mo Xian continued, his peach blossom eyes overflowing with resplendent radiance, like stars. This made Yi Qing Luo totally unable to open her mouth to say any words of rejection. Mo Xian's waist bent slightly as he lowered his body. That cold, peerless face was magnified in Yi Qing Luo's pupils at such a close distance. The dense kisses fell on her face bit by bit, accompanied by the man's hoarse voice. If Lil Luo doesn't give me a reward, I won't listen. Yi Qing Luo, didn't he say that he would be attached to her and listen to her after being poisoned by the love goo? Now, he actually dared to turn the tables on her? Under the insistence of Mo Xian, Yi Qing Luo was eventually defeated. Forget it. Helping him once is also helping him. Helping twice is still helping. Who asked this puppy to become like this because of her? Who asked this puppy to be the man she loved the most? She could only pamper him. But after his goo poison was cured, Yi Qing Luo's eyes flashed past a cold glint. Humph, humph. She must definitely get back at him. The two of them had already walked out of the hospital and saw Butler Ian walking over. Chapter 2682. What's the matter? Yi Qing Luo stopped in her tracks. Housekeeper Ian was all smiles. Sovereign asked me to invite Miss Yi over to discuss something important. Something important? Yi Qing Luo raised her brows slightly. She glanced at Mo Xian from the corner of her eyes. Mo Xian's expression was indifferent, but his gaze towards her was gentle, as though he couldn't see housekeeper Yin's existence. She heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Mo Xian maintained this look, no matter what Yin Qinghao wanted to discuss with her, she didn't need to worry that Yin Qinghao would detect Mo Xian's abnormality. She smiled and pinched Mo Xian's palm in the dark, smiling. Then I'll have to trouble housekeeper Ian to lead the way. Overlord, please, Miss Yi, please. Housekeeper Ian immediately stretched out his hand and respectfully welcomed the both of them as they walked into the main courtyard. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, Housekeeper Ian brought the both of them to a more secluded but extremely safe study room. Sovereign is waiting for both of you inside. Housekeeper Ian bowed slightly. The room door opened and Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian walked in. The study room was extremely spacious, and the surroundings were filled with bookshelves. On the bookshelves, there were all kinds of books, neatly arranged. There were 2 office tables, one on the left and one on the right. Yin Qinghao was sitting at the right side of the table. Beside him was the suave Yin Yanxiu. Seeing the both of them entering, Yin Qinghao stood up and laughed heartily. "Overlord, Miss Yi, you're here. Come, come, come. Have a seat, have a seat." Yiqing Luo didn't stand on ceremony. She pulled Dmo Xian over and sat opposite Yin Qinghao. The smile on Yin Qinghao's face deepened as he poured a cup of tea for Dmo Xian and Yiqing Luo as he smiled. "I'd not expected that when I mentioned Miss Yi earlier, Miss Yi would come over. What a coincidence." If there was anyone else around to see the scene, they would probably be so shocked that their jaws would drop onto the ground. Since when did the overlord of Qin Yu clan personally pour tea for others? Even if the various continents' monarchs were here, or the other 3 continents' overlords, they wouldn't be able to drink the tea personally poured by Qin Yu clan's overlord. But Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian, in front of Yin Qinghao, were considered as juniors among juniors. Yet, Yin Qinghao had personally poured tea for her. He even had a smile on his face, as if he didn't have any grudges. In this world, only these 2 people could be treated like this by Yin Qinghao. I also happen to want to discuss something with Sect Master Yin. Yiqing Luo wasn't pretentious, as her eyes curved slightly, looking as though she was in a good mood. "I wonder what's the reason why Sect Master Yin is looking for me." Yin Qinghao picked up the teacup and took a sip. His eyes were blurred by the steam from the tea, and his expression could not be seen clearly. "This is what I promised the overlord that I would do after the birthday banquet." Dmo Xian, Yiqing Luo's heart thumped. He shot a sideways glance at Dmo Xian. What deal did Dmo Xian and Yin Qinghao discuss in private previously? But the current Dmo Xian, he probably didn't remember what deal he had made with Yin Qinghao. Yiqing Luo held Dmo Xian's hand tightly as she coughed lightly, making her own emotions and tone appear calm and tranquil. "Oh, what's so mysterious about it?" Yin Qinghao didn't say a word as he put down the teacup and fixed his gaze on Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo didn't know what the deal between the both of them was. She also didn't know what kind of response she should let Dmo Xian make. Just as she was thinking, suddenly the man beside her moved slightly. Chapter 2683. "Just do as I said," said Yi Futian. His cold voice was noble and elegant, without any trace of emotions. Yin Qinghao immediately nodded his head and whispered to Yin Yanxiu, "Take good care of the overlord and Miss Yi. I'll be right back." "Yes, father." Yin Yanxiu bowed slightly. Yin Qinghao cupped his hands in greeting towards Dmo Xian's direction as he turned around and walked towards one of the bookshelves. He didn't avoid it, and in front of Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian, he directly opened the secret room of the bookshelf and walked in. Yiqing Luo retracted her gaze as she leaned her soft body into Dmo Xian's arms. Her hand, at a place where Yin Yanxiu couldn't see, pinched Dmo Xian's waist fiercely. The firm feeling was extremely good to touch. Yiqing Luo loved the feeling of a man's body. It could be said that she couldn't bear to part with it. Yiqing Luo raised her head slightly as her chin rested on his chest. That elegant face stared straight at Dmo Xian, as though she was puzzled. Why would Dmo Xian still have those memories of his private transactions with Yin Qinghao? And it would be at the most opportune timing. Making the most opportune response? Dmo Xian's eyes drooped. His jet black peach blossom eyes met her eyes. The man's eyes were filled with a gentle and loving smile. He bent his head and accurately kissed her on the lips. Like a deity's handsome face, the warm touch, the elegant sandalwood scent, made Yi-Ching Luo dazed for a moment. When she regained her senses, after realizing the man's actions, her cheeks were stained with a faint shade of red. Yin Yanxiu was still watching by the side. He kissed her just like that. Didn't she want her face? But the next moment, accompanied by the man's gentle kiss, the man's smiling voice floated over. I did well, I want a reward. Yi-Ching Luo. So he was all aiming for the reward? For the reward, he could actually use his brain to think of other things other than her? This kiss wasn't long, but it was enough to make Yi-Ching Luo's face flushed red, until Dmo Xian released Yi-Ching Luo's lips. Yi-Ching Luo then pushed Dmo Xian's chest away fiercely and shifted towards her own position. She sat upright, picked up the teacup in front of her, and held it with both hands, covering half of her face. She looked up and happened to see Yin Yanxiu's smiling expression. Her face turned even redder. One had to know that in Yin Yanxiu's eyes, she must have been the one who took the initiative to provoke Dmo Xian. She nestled beside Dmo Xian and raised her head to look at his posture. It really did look like he was asking for a kiss. Damn it! Could Yin Yanxiu have misunderstood something? Yi-Ching Luo coughed violently. Miss Ye's relationship with Di Zun is really enviable. Yin Yanxiu saw Yi-Ching Luo's predicament as he laughed softly, and his tone was filled with envy. I hope that in future, I will also be able to meet such sincere feelings like Miss Yi and the Overlord. Yi-Ching Luo coughed even more violently. Looking at Yi-Ching Luo's blushing face, Yin Yanxiu didn't wish to see any embarrassing things happen, so he automatically shifted the topic. I wonder what Miss Yi is looking for father for. Yi-Ching Luo was naturally happy to shift the topic as she gave a dry laugh. I'm here to bid farewell to Sect Master Yin. Farewell. Yin Yanxiu was stunned. If Qingyue sect has any unsatisfactory hospitality, will Miss Yi please point it out? Chapter 2684. Yin Yanxiu suddenly straightened his body. If Miss Yi feels that the Qingyue sect is too noisy, I can also ask my father to transfer all the forces that are staying here. Young Sect Master Yin. Yi-Ching Luo interrupted his words. As the young matriarch of Qinyu clan, there are some things that you should know what to say and what not to say. Yin Yanxiu's words were stuck in his throat. Indeed, as the young matriarch of the Qinyu sect, if he really made those powerhouses who were staying in the Qinyu sect leave because they wanted Yi-Ching Luo to stay, this young sect master, it was a complete corruption of character. It would also ruin the Qinyu sect's reputation. Yin Yanxiu's face flushed red. It seemed that even he himself did not understand. At the instant when he heard Yi-Ching Luo saying her farewells, he actually spoke out all the thoughts in his heart without thinking it through. Yi-Ching Luo didn't want Yin Yanxiu to continue feeling awkward. We'll be leaving later. Of course, if Qinyu clan needs my help, as long as it's within my capabilities, I'll still be able to help. Yin Yanxiu nodded his head absent-mindedly and grunted. He knew that Yi Luo was smart. His actions just now, Yi Luo must have seen through his thoughts. In fact, he did have a good impression of Yi Luo. However, he also knew that there was a huge gap between him and Di Zun. He only wanted to be friends with Yi Chengcheng, and that was enough. Unexpectedly, he still couldn't control his emotions. As the young sect master of the Qinyu sect, his words and actions represented the Qinyu sect. He should be trying his best to control his emotions. Because of this episode, the two of them didn't speak anymore. Yi-Ching Luo was just about to go drink some tea. Suddenly, a hand reached out and gripped her teacup. Yi-Ching Luo was startled and glanced sideways, only to see Dmo Xian putting on a straight face as he heavily placed the teacup in her hands onto the table. Following that, He grabbed Yi Qing Luo's wrist. He pulled hard. Yi Qing Luo fell into Dmo Xian's embrace. The man's hands circled her waist forcefully. The other hand also circled around, not giving Yi Qing Luo any chance to struggle. "Ah, Xian!" Yi Qing Luo called out to him softly, as she shot a sideways glance at Yin Yanxiu. The man lowered his head and bit her on the neck. He bit down hard. Yi Qing Luo frowned in pain. This scene caused Yin Yanxiu's gaze to wander around helplessly, not daring to look at them. Naturally, she missed out on Dmo Xian's current expression, which was like a dog-like pet who had been snatched away. "Ah, Xian!" Yi Qing Luo called out in a low voice as her little hand pushed against his chest. "Pain!" I heard her cry out in pain. Dmo Xian then loosened the strength of his teeth. The man's voice was full of grievance and displeasure. He moved closer to her ear and said in a very low voice, "I don't like you talking to him," that he was referring to Yin Yanxiu. He was jealous. Yi Qing Luo smiled as she raised her hand to stroke his fur. "We're just discussing some matters. After we're done, we'll leave this place and won't have any more interactions with him." Dmo Xian was still unhappy as he clenched his fists and gave a childish snort in her ear. "Mine." "And yours." Yi Qing Luo continued to stroke his fur. She liked this feeling of being so attached to by Dmo Xian. Stroking his fur, there was a sound coming from the bookshelf. Yin Qinghao's figure once again appeared in the study room. In his hand, there was an additional jade box which was emitting a white glow. Yi Qing Luo's eyes flashed slightly. Chapter 2685. That moonlight porcelain box was approximately the size of Yin Qinghao's palm. Yin Qinghao used such a rare and precious moonlight porcelain to carve the jade box. What was inside? What on earth was it? The thing in the moonlight porcelain box was absolutely very important. Yi Qing Luo stood up from Dmo Xian's arms. Yin Qinghao carefully carried the moonlight porcelain box with both hands as he returned to his seat and smiled. "I've made the Overlord and Miss Yi wait for a long time." Yi Qing Luo stared at the moonlight porcelain box. "Sect Master Yin, this is—" Yin Qinghao placed the thing on the table, and although he was smiling, but Yi Qing Luo, who was good at observing, how could she not tell? Yin Qinghao's face was filled with complicated and unwillingness. Apparently, he didn't want to take this thing out, but he had no choice but to take it out. After a long time, Yin Qinghao shut his eyes as though he had lost all his strength as he leaned against the back of the chair. "Miss Yi, this is my Qin sect's ancestral treasure." Black tortoise bead. Black tortoise bead? Hearing these three words, Yi Qing Luo abruptly stood up from Dmo Xian's arms. Her eyes widened as she stared at the moonlight porcelain box in disbelief. "You said, this is the black tortoise bead?" This was one of the sacred beast beads. Black tortoise bead? The sacred beast bead, which was guarded by the four major sects? Qin sect had been guarding the black tortoise bead for tens of thousands of years, passed down from generation to generation. Yin Qinghao's voice was slightly hoarse. "This thing, what use does it have as the descendants of Qin sect? We don't know." He paused as he raised his head and pushed the moonlight porcelain box towards Yi Qing Luo. "I know, Miss Yi needs the black tortoise bead." Yi Qing Luo looked at the jade box, which was emitting fluorescent light, as her breathing tightened slightly. She turned her head sideways as she looked at the man beside her. Yin Qinghao would automatically take out the black tortoise bead. It must be Dmo Xian's intention. What on earth did Dmo Xian offer in exchange? To actually make Yin Qinghao hand over his ancestral heirloom with both hands. "Miss Yi, this matter. Actually, it's not considered as a deal between me and the Overlord." Yin Qinghao saw Yi Qing Luo's expression and guessed what she was thinking. Not a deal? If it wasn't a trade, how could Yin Qinghao take out his ancestral treasure? Yin Qinghao smiled and said, "Although His Majesty is known to be cruel, bloodthirsty, and ruthless, I know that His Majesty is not a person who kills innocent people. He's the strongest person in the Nirvana realm, and the person that everyone in the Nirvana realm yearns to be his disciple. He naturally has his reasons for asking me to hand the black tortoise orb to you." He paused again. The reluctance on his face gradually disappeared. "Of course, I'm not giving you the black tortoise bead." Yin Qinghao replied, "I'm only lending it to Miss Yi. After Miss Yi finishes using it, I'll return it to the Qinghua sect." Yi Qing Luo pursed her pink lips. She fixed her eyes on the moonlight porcelain box. His heart was in a mess. Black tortoise pearl, the first sacred beast pearl, had already appeared. If she accepted it, it meant that she had already chosen the second path to the upper realm. Gathering all the sacred beast pearls, this was the choice that DMO Xian had made for her. Yi Qing Luo's gaze slowly shifted onto DMO Xian. Xian, he hoped that she could go to the upper realm, hoping that she could improve herself as soon as possible, hoping that she could climb to the peak. The only way was to head to the upper realm as soon as possible. Then she could become stronger faster. Lil Luo. Chapter 2686. Yi Qing Luo was still deep in her thoughts, suddenly being leaned on by DMO Xian. Her petite body trembled slightly, listening to the man's slightly aggrieved voice ringing beside her ear. She then collected her thoughts and wrapped her arms around his waist, smelling the man's sandalwood scent on her shoulder. Yi Qing Luo's heart was unprecedentedly calm. "We'll go back immediately." She opened her mouth. Her voice was so low that only the both of them could hear. Immediately, she gently pulled apart the distance between the two of them. She smiled and looked at Yin Qinghao. Her charming eyes were overflowing with color, sparkling with a resolute light. "All right, I'll borrow the black tortoise bead from you." She stretched out her hand and swept it across the moonlight porcelain box. Lowering her eyes, she looked at the lustrous white light on her palm and said word by word, "This is the favor that I, Yi Qing Luo, owe you. If there's a day Sect Master Yi needs anything, I will do my best to help." At this moment, she no longer concealed her identity. Yi Qing Luo. These three words came out from Yi Qing Luo's mouth. Yin Qinghao and Yin Yanxiu were stunned on the spot. This name was absolutely not unfamiliar. Not long ago, the young lady whose name had spread throughout the entire Nirvana realm. In the Southern Continent's exchange meat training, she had saved various academies in various continents. In the Western Continent, she had stopped the invasion of the Dark Forces. A young lady, Nirvana realm's new legend, a new myth. Extraordinary strength, possessing a divine weapon, and having a close relationship with the Overlord. She possessed a peerless beauty that could topple cities. In the Nirvana realm, she was known as the female version of the Overlord. Unexpectedly, this beautiful young lady in front of him would be the legendary goddess Yi Qing Luo. Wait a minute, Yi Luo, Yi Qing Luo? Was it really her? Yin Qinghao's gaze stared intently at Yi Qing Luo's face. "Miss Yi, I didn't expect you to be the West Continent's hero. Your face. Is this a disguise?" Being in a high position, Yin Qinghao had long since mastered the ability to avoid danger. Recognizing faces was one of the most important skills. Yin Qinghao had absolute confidence. He could distinguish a real face and a disguised face at one glance. It was precisely because of Yin Qinghao's confidence that he was extremely certain that Yi Luo's elegant face was absolutely not a disguise. He had totally not thought of Yi Qing Luo as the West Continent's hero. Unexpectedly, this face was actually a disguise. Yi Qing Luo touched her own face and smiled as she shot a glance at DMO Xian. "It's Xian who helped me." Yin Qinghao was completely convinced. Only Di Zun could pass off the fake as the genuine one. Even with his fiery eyes of gold, he could not see anything wrong. Yin Qinghao sighed silently to himself once again. He hadn't made the wrong choice, standing on the Overlord's side without any hesitation, standing on Yi Qing Luo's side. Regarding this matter, I hope that Headmaster Yin will keep it to yourself. Yi Qing Luo kept the moonlight porcelain box back into the profound phoenix ring. Yin Qinghao readily agreed. Since Yi Qing Luo was here in disguise, naturally, she did not want others to recognize her. He wouldn't be so silly to expose Yi Qing Luo's identity. That's right, Miss Yi specially came to look for me. What's the matter? Yin Qinghao recalled that Yi Qing Luo specially came to the main courtyard to look for him, as he immediately asked. Yi Qing Luo had yet to open her mouth. Beside Yin Qinghao, Yin Yanxiu, who seemed to have lost his soul, said in a hoarse voice, Miss Yi is here to bid farewell. Farewell. Chapter 2687. After all, he had been in power for many years. His reaction was much steadier than Yin Yanxiu's. As the sovereign of Qinghua sect, Yin Qinghao naturally hoped that DMO Xian and Yi Qing Luo could continue to stay in Qinghua sect. After all, one was His Majesty and the other was Master Guiwu. It was enough to raise the prestige of the Qinyu sect to the peak. However, Yin Qinghao was also aware of this. DMO Xian and Yi Qing Luo continued to stay in the Qinghua clan. The other factions in the Qinghua sect would think of ways to harass them, thinking of the Miao father and daughters prancing around these few days. It was also his dereliction of duty as the sect leader. Yin Qinghao naturally wouldn't stop them. He was in no position to ask her to stay. The great Joy sect's ancestral treasures were all given away, even if DMO Xian and Yi Qing Luo weren't staying in the Qinghua sect. However, this feeling was still there. After exchanging some conventional greetings, Yi Qing Luo brought DMO Xian and left the main courtyard. Yin Qinghao immediately stood up to see him off. After sending DMO Xian and Yi Qing Luo off, Yin Qinghao heaved a sigh of relief as he turned his head back and looked at his son, who had remained silent all this while. Ah, Xiao, that's not a woman you can think of. I know. Yin Yanxiu was in a daze as he spoke in a hoarse voice. She is Yi Qing Luo, the one who is hailed as the heroic goddess in the Western continent. I know. I am not worthy of her. It's not that I don't deserve you. Yin Qinghao patted his son on the shoulder. This was the first time he had seen his son, who had always been high-spirited, in such a dejected manner. He raised his eyes and looked at the backs of the two people who were leaving together. He slowly said, You can't control her. In this world, I'm afraid only His Majesty can truly walk side by side with her. I'm not stupid enough to fight with Di Zun for a woman. Yin Yanxiu took a deep breath. His chest felt a little stuffy, but he forced himself to stay awake. I'm just envious. Towards Yi Qing Luo, he indeed had a favorable impression. A lady like Yi Qing Luo, who was unrestrained and had a unique charm. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a negative opinion of her from the very beginning. Basically, anyone who interacted with Yi Qing Luo would develop a favorable impression towards her. He knew his place. Having a good impression didn't mean that it had to continue developing. We can be friends. This was already the best ending for him. After they walked out of the main courtyard, DMO Xian hugged Yi Qing Luo's petite figure as his brows were filled with smiles. Lil Luo, reward, reward, reward. His tone was cheerful. Yi Qing Luo seemed to be able to see the shaking tail behind DMO Xian. It was becoming more and more like a canine pet. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but laugh. She kissed him on the lips happily and said, This is the deposit. The rest can wait until we go to the Peach Blossom restaurant. In the study room, if it wasn't for the fact that DMO Xian was by her side, she would probably not be able to make a decision till now. It was DMO Xian who gave her great courage. DMO Xian must really want her to become stronger. Only by becoming stronger, only by possessing the power to protect himself, could he be at ease and completely open up his world to her. and she would then be able to truly accept all of DMO Xian. Only by becoming stronger could one protect the people or things one wanted to protect. He did not need to blindly rely on his powerful backer and his own luck to pass his days. Gathering the 4 sacred beast pearls was indeed dangerous. But wasn't there a price to pay for growth? Without danger, how could one grow in adversity? Life couldn't always be smooth sailing. Chapter 2688. She wanted to collect the 4 sacred beast pearls and didn't want to use her life as a joke. She didn't want the people she cared about to worry about her. She didn't want to contract the sacred beast pearls, and after it became her lifeline, it would be snatched away by others then. She would make herself stronger during the period of searching for the 4 sacred beast pearls. This was growth. Moreover, she already had the 7-7 white tiger sacred beast, scarlet flame vermilion bird sacred beast, and a half-soul state black tortoise sacred beast, as long as she found the azure dragon sacred beast. The 4 sacred beasts were all gathered. She also had a black tortoise pearl in her hands. As for the white tiger pearl, it should be easy for Xiaoyu to search for it in 3 Springs sect. As for the vermilion bird pearl, Gu Jingyu's face flashed past Yi Qing Luo's mind. She shook her head. By then, there should be a way to make a trip to South Continent. They went to the Peach Blossom restaurant to inform Tao Zi. Yi Qing Luo then pulled DMO Xian back to Qinghua sect. They got the news that they were leaving. All the major forces rushed over in an attempt to persuade them to stay. But under the temptation of Yi Qing Luo's huge reward, the Overlord, who had turned into an overbearing aura, suppressed the surrounding people so that no one dared to get close to him. Even if it was Yin Qinghao who wanted to hold a banquet for them, his voice was trembling uncontrollably. Why did he feel that, as compared to the time in the study, the Overlord's aura was even more terrifying? After Yi Qing Luo rejected him, the group of them left in a grandiose manner. After Miao Yi and Xian Gui left Qinghua sect, they expressed that they wanted to return to the Miao Stockade village to prepare for the Sacred Maiden selection next month. Yi Qing Luo naturally had no objections, but Chi-Chi, who was standing by the side, was biting on Xian Gui's robe, not willing to let him leave. Xian Gui was confused by Chi-Chi's enthusiasm. In the end, Yi Qing Luo went over and carried Chi-Chi back. Your magical beast seems to like Gui very much. Miao Yi looked at Xian Gui and Chi-Chi and couldn't help but laughed. Yi Qing Luo nodded slightly as her hand unintentionally stroked Chi-Chi's little head. But her eyes were fixed on Xian Gui. A solemn look appeared in the depths of his eyes. Xian Gui sensed the look in her eyes and moved away from Miao Yi uncomfortably. Miao Yi patted Xian Gui lightly and looked at Yi Qing Luo. What's wrong? I'm fine. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as she concealed the deep meaning in her eyes. You and Xian. Gui, wait for us at the Miao Stockade village. See you in a month's time. He watched Miao Yi and Xian Gui leave. Yi Qing Luo's gloomy and unclear gaze had yet to be retracted. Howl! Chi-Chi, who was in his arms, suddenly let out a low, trembling whimper, calling back Yi Qing Luo's senses. Lowering her eyes, she stroked Chi-Chi's little head gently. However, all he saw was Chi-Chi's fur standing on end, and her eyes filled with fear. Afraid? Chi-Chi? Yi Qing Luo seemed to have thought of something as she turned her head around. Indeed, there was a man with a dark expression behind her, glaring at Mu Chi-Chi with a pair of vicious eyes. The jealousy on his face was undisguised. You're even jealous of a cat. Yi Qing Luo looked at the man whose vinegar jar had been overturned in front of her. Her little hand comforted Chi-Chi and kept Chi-Chi into the pet space. Chapter 2689. Chi-Chi's childlike voice was still trembling. If you have the ability, go and stand in front of Master Dizun. If you can stay calm under Master Dizun's gaze for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, then Chi-Chi will lose. Oh, Qi Yan snorted coldly. Chi-Chi also scoffed. Why? You don't dare, do you? Don't laugh at me if you don't dare to. Qi Yan, I wouldn't dare? Would I, the mighty holy vermilion bird, be afraid of a human? It's not that this sacred beast doesn't dare, but this sacred beast disdains it. In the end, Qi Yan still did not dare. He was just trying to save face. Yi Qing Luo withdrew her divine sense and raised her eyes to look at the gloomy man. This man, even if he was poisoned by the love goo, he had already forgotten everything else apart from her. Not only did others fear him, even holy beasts submitted to his aura. Yes, as expected of her man. Yi Qing Luo raised her lips, opened her arms, and threw herself into Dmo Xian's arms. Her arms wrapped around his waist. Her coquettish voice was sweet and seductive. Xian, let's go. The young lady's fragrance and gentleness made Dmo Xian's gloomy expression gradually soften. He wrapped an arm around the girl's waist and looked down. His unbound black hair cascaded down his back. As he lowered his head, a few strands of black hair fell on his face. People were coming and going on the streets. On the second floor, around the corner, a woman who was about to put a glass of wine into her mouth happened to see the scene. The man was extraordinarily handsome, like a god, and could be said to be peerless in his generation. His eyes were as deep as ink. His facial features were so regular that no flaws could be found. Her rosy red lips were pursed, showing a kind of alienation and indifference. However, when the man looked at the girl in his arms, it was as if a 10,000-year-old iceberg had been melted by something. The wine glass in the woman's hand shattered with a crack. The woman's face was ferocious and filled with murderous intent. She glared fiercely at the figure and the person in her arms. When his gaze landed on the young but extremely ordinary girl's face, he felt a chill run down his spine. The woman's jealousy and hatred burned like fire. Yi Qing Luo was lying on top of Dmo Xian, trying to pacify the vinegar jar. Suddenly, he felt a strong murderous intent. She frowned and looked in the direction of the murderous aura. However, he didn't see anything. No. At the same time, the killing intent vanished. It was as if the murderous aura she sensed was just an illusion. Yi Qing Luo was just about to push Dmo Xian away, wanting to head to the opposite pub to see what was going on. However, her waist was tightly hugged by the man's warm and thick palm. Lil Luor, the canine pet's voice, carried a hint of displeasure. He seemed to be annoyed that she wasn't paying attention to him even though she was trying to soothe him. Yi Qing Luo raised her head and looked at Dmo Xian's blazing black eyes. She blinked her eyes. In the end, she buried her head in his arms. Forget it. After all, this was the main street and there were people coming and going. Even if she really went to the tavern, that guy with the murderous aura had probably left long ago. Later, he would ask Peach to go to the tavern and check which customers had been to the second floor. Pacifying her husband was the most important thing. He seemed to be extremely satisfied with Yi Qing Luo's action. Dmo Xian's stiff face finally revealed a faint smile as his lips curled. Hey, the two of you. Are you leaving or not? When are you going to stop showing off your love? Yan Xiaoyi, who came late, tugged Xiao Jin's arm as she looked at them in disdain.